Well met, and welcome to day 2 of the 2016 Hearthstone Championship Tour, America's Spring Championship. I'm Robert Wing, joined on the desk by Brian Kibler and Frodan. As we began the weekend, 8 players set out for the title of America's Spring Champion for Maine, and by day's end, we will have our champion heading to the Hearthstone World Championship at BlizzCon in November. Guys, obviously it was a fun day yesterday. Anything that really has stood out for you, either of you at this point, from this tournament?
So far, I've been particularly impressed by Rosti. I think that he was my pick going in to win the event, and just watching him play and seeing sort of what he has to say about the way he approaches the game have just been really impressive.
Sure. Yeah, I think the really interesting thing is that we don't have necessarily the most notable players here in the America's Championship for this season. And every season tends to have one region that has that kind of a turnout. But as a result, I don't think the quality of plays really suffered. And I think we do have some people who are clearly also a cut above the pack, and they're in the top 4 today. So I'm expecting some more good stuff for day number 2.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a quick look at who has survived at this point. In the brackets here, we have Cydonia, Napoleon, Joster, and Rosti. So, as you said, these are the 4 players who have survived from these initial 8. Go ahead and take a look at the schedule for today. We're going to have a pair of semifinals before we end with the grand finals. As I said, the winner of today will be the America's Spring Champion. We'll claim a prize purse, reasonable value there. There'll be, obviously, the title and that trip to the World Championship later. Let's go ahead and take a look as well at the Championship Tour schedule. We close out the Spring Championship season today. We have about a month and a half off before we get into the summer season with the Europe Summer Preliminary on August 12th through 14th and the America's Summer Preliminary August 19th through the 21st. So a little bit of downtime, but you could be out there actually yourself earning those points from the ranked play seasons, the cups, those big majors such as those dream hacks out there.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a time off for us as casters, but for players, this is the time period that really does matter. If you're looking to get up on the stage yourself, next season is the perfect opportunity to do so.
And who knows? We all know that the new content Hearthstone will eventually be coming, and August is around that time period where I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but it will be really exciting because last time the preliminaries happened, Whisper of the Old Gods just dropped. So I think it'll be really cool to see what timeline's going to be lining up with everything else. So if you're watching Hearthstone for the first time and you're thinking you really want to get into it, I think now is a good time to start as well.
Agreed. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first semifinal of the day. It's going to be Cydonia taking on Napoleon. Cydonia coming in here representing Canada. But a very smooth performance is, I think, the best way to describe it. Wasn't looking very nervous. Came in, played his game, was able to win out. Napoleon coming in here, most dominating performance of the day by the numbers. 4-1 over Dwayne. Put on a clinic of his own. Played Freeze Mage extremely well. Very excited to see what we can expect from these two gentlemen.
Yeah, both these players had great performances in their first match. Like you mentioned, Cydonia definitely an image of just calm, cool, collected. Napoleon a bit more emotional, both in his wins and his losses. We'll see how that works out for the 2 players in their semifinal match.
Yeah, specifically with Cydonia, you got to saw him really punish Shaman a lot. And it was really interesting because Shaman's a deck that a lot of people have also been complaining about. We can just be very candid, and open about it. People really feel like it's a class that's kind of overbearing. But in tournament play, we've been seeing more people open up their lineups to it, and they choose to ban other classes. They feel like Shaman has significant weaknesses. And yesterday, Cydonia was proving it by almost 4-0ing in a Shaman class. So I think that's something to reevaluate going into the future weeks as well. Where is Shaman really sitting in the true rankings of the classes?
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at how Cydonia got to this point. He came in here qualifying from the America's Spring Preliminary, won out in all of his matches, went all the way through the upper bracket. Came in yesterday as another one of those players with the big question mark next to him that people hadn't necessarily heard of him. What was his game going to be like? And as you were saying, Brian, cool, calm, and collected was definitely the way of things. Taking a look at some of the people he had to get through. Snail, the Argentinian representative from the America's Winter Championship. Real Terror, Legolas, and Joster, who is obviously still here. So great to see both Joster and Cydonia make it. Let's go ahead and take a look at him closing it out against Dear Jason yesterday.
Yeah, this was a very close match in the end. Went down to the final game, which ended up being Cydonia's mid-range Hunter deck against Dear Jason, playing that token Yogg Druid. We never did quite get to see the God of Death do his thing, but it was a hard-fought match on both sides.
Yeah, if Yogg-Saron never comes out, then it's a pretty good way to play around him. Just never let it get to that point. And Cydonia pretty much cinched this one out with kind of a cat party at the end. Just 2 Savannah High Mains, a Stranglethorn Tagger, and it was just more cats than Dear Jason was equipped to handle.
I do think that just the final game was sort of a demonstration of people saying, oh, how can you beat Yogg? It's a powerful card, does all these things. It's like, well, you kill your opponent before they cast him, which is a very real answer to many of the old gods.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to deal with a deck full of answers. Just keep putting on pressure, and then those high mains come out. They're very difficult to remove, so I agree. If you're out there and you're worried about Yogg-Saron becoming something you have to deal with in all tournaments,
Win by turn 9.
Yeah, just win by turn 9. It's that easy. Napoleon, on the other hand, came in 4-1 Dwayne, and really, I think what really stood out to me most about his play is how much he really took each turn and really thought through all the possible ways he could possibly misplay and chose, obviously to go with the correct line of play. And he's been someone who's very vocal that he believes he is just as good, if not better, than most of the people you are seeing in the major tournaments. And I think came in here yesterday and made a strong case for that argument.
Yeah, his play was excellent. I think the play that really stood out the most to me was when he was playing his warrior deck against Hunter. And on turn 8, he just played Grom against the trap and said, go. A lot of players I think would want to play. He had a Korkan elite he could have used to trigger what was clearly a freezing trap, but he wanted to set up his Grom for the future turn, make the most of his mana, just pass the turn back to his opponent, and then set up to answer the freezing trap on the following turn, knowing that his opponent was not going to expend a bunch of resources to kill his 9 health Grom.
I do think that Napoleon's dominant performance yesterday is largely attributed to also the fact that he was really expecting a lot of players to bring the Hunter class this weekend, which he was pretty much spot on with. 7 out of 8 players did bring the Hunter. So he specifically was playing against Dwayne, who kept queuing up the Hunter. And that's kind of like not exactly what you want to do, but I can understand Dwayne's point of view too. He wants to get the Hunter win out of the way, so that way he can queue up other things. So even though you look at the series result 4-1, I expect today to be a little bit closer up against his other opponents, especially against Cydonia.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very good match. In our second semifinal of the day, Joster is going to be taking on Rosti. Joster came in here, and we've talked a lot over the spring championship season. Thank you, Joster. We talked a lot about how a lot of players come into these events with a lot of bravado, a lot of machismo. They want to come in here and prove that they are going to be the guy. They are the best player here. Joster's coming in here a little bit unassuming and just going to come in here, have fun, hope he wins. He already feels extremely happy with the progress he's made. Rossi, on the other hand, a little bit more of a perfectionist, looking to come in here and show players at home that there's a right and a wrong way to play the game. He intends to play it the right way and use that as his way to victory.
I mean, both players, I think, definitely, not necessarily the bravado type, as you mentioned. Right. Joster definitely a little more sort of joking, calm, relaxed. Rosti, more of the calculating perfectionist, as you mentioned. Sure. But both of them, not the big personalities we've really seen from some other players.
Sure.
However, I think their play really compensates for it. I think one thing that you got to admit from Joster is that he's pretty brave with some of the deck lists that he brought. I think Reno Warlock is definitely a list that everyone knows is acceptable, and even Joster even admits that he necessarily wasn't exactly too sure on it, but it's gotten him this far in the tournament. And if he can win with other stuff like Rogue too, I know that scores big bucks with some of the other players and fans, because Rogue's always one of those classes that people love to live and die by. So if he can do it, he's kind of the dark horse, man. I think a lot of people are counting on Napoleon or Cydonia or even Rosti as being the 3 guys that they're focusing on today. But it's always one of those sleeper guys that really strikes you in card games like Hearthstone.
I think this matchup's going to be especially tough for Joster, though. Rosti's lineup is very aggressive. He has that Dragon Warrior. He has the more aggressive version of Hunter. Both of those can prove very challenging for either the Reno Warlock or the Rogue to find a win again.
Yeah, what a time to be alive where we, in essence, say Face Hunter is something kind of unique and cool to bring. Well, it's not necessarily even an aggressive Face Hunter, but it's like we see all this variation within Rosti's Hunter deck that is much more aggressive that we haven't seen in the past. So I want to see if some of these small decisions that we haven't got to see yet play out on the stream, will it pay off for some of these players?
Yeah, and I think, speaking again to Rosti, even coming in here, I think he's kind of an intimidating figure to play against. Taking a look at how he got to this point, Rosti, as I said, has been very outspoken about the fact that when you play Hearthstone, there isn't necessarily play styles, right? There's always the highest possible percentage play you can make that gives you the best chance to win, and really showed it off yesterday. Came in, took a quick loss, but managed to turn it around and close out Bradford Lee with what seemed like a relative degree of ease.
Yeah, if you look at Rosti's resume to even qualify, I think he had probably the hardest path from beginning to end. You see all 5 players that he was able to go on an undefeated streak against. They're all notable players in their own rights, whether through tournament results, ladder finishes, or even just notoriety. You saw like BB, Gun, Neo Ability. These are guys who also help some of the top winners of tournaments prepare for their events. So, I mean, Rosti's had a really difficult path to get here. So I really think that he is well seasoned and groomed to potentially take it all and go far.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously, Brian, yesterday you and I made our predictions as far as who we expect to win out the championship. We're still live. Cora unfortunately did not make it with her pick, but with we had the opportunity rather to sit down with the rest of the casters yesterday and kind of figure out what exactly was going through their heads after day 1 and who they had taking it on day 2.
Bread represents a player. This one is a large piece of bread. It represents the large potential of Ross.
More importantly, who's going to win tomorrow?
I'm going Napoleon. We were sitting down when we went to the dinner the other night with the players. I was asking the table a bunch of questions about like weird things in Hearthstone. Like what's the worst card you can get from Faceless Summoner? And Napoleon would answer right away. And he would, Iron Beak Owl. So what is, oh, okay. Alarm Bot can be good though, situationally.
Yeah, so can Iron Beak Owl.
He actually went on an explanation of why Iron Beak Owl is the worst. But it's things like that. Napoleon just knows so much about the game. He spends so much time watching, and he spends so much time playing and practicing that, you know, I think he's gonna take it.
I'm gonna go with Rosti. I really liked what he said about actually having his hood up to block out other distractions. Much like Rob throwing a walnut into TJ's shirt, Rosti would have blocked that out and not let it affect his
That was at
turn
least a
of play.
3-pointer.
I'm going to go with Napoleon, actually, because I just think that comes across very confident, but even in the set he played, he had the most dominant performance. But I think, like, you saw him visibly relax as the game went on, and I think that'll really help him out for tomorrow.
But Napoleon did play really well. He was saying that he hated his Freeze Mage play with the Frostbolt Icelands, but we were talking, and it's like Icelands is 1 out of 13 cards. It's
it wasn't a bad play. There was just 2 roots, right?
It's only the wrong play 1 out of 13
But that's what
times.
makes someone like him so interesting is the fact that, like you said, it's a 1 in 13, and he won 4-1, just the most dominating series of the day. But he still goes into it and it's like, like I messed up, like I didn't play as well as I could have.
So some of the best players are like that, though. You look at like players like RDU. If he can 4-0 a set, as soon as it's over, he'll just go to the VODs, watch every single game, and be like, right, what could I have done better? And that's what actually makes the best players.
So finals is gonna be Napoleon Rossi.
No, it's going to be Cydonia. I want that point. Do you guys realize how dangerously close I am to having a point on the caster prediction board? Like,
Hey, you're still 2 matches away.
This walnut represents.
Sidonia's.
Rob really wants to be right for once.
it's so desperate. You don't even know. Like,
Get used to being wrong, Rob.
I actually called my mom after the match, and I was like, Mom!
You can't
so
spell.
close.
You can't spell Rob Ring without wrong.
That's actually accurate.
Okay,
Well, as is tradition here at the Hearthstone Championship Tourcast, is that time of day where it's time to cut the rotisserie chicken with a giant sword.
I always thought we were going to just execute a caster, which I thought for sure was going to be
Don't
me.
ruin
but
it with your words, Rob.
Like
Where's
right
the
down
chop?
the middle.
You can tell TJ's done this before.
He said it was tradition.
And with that,
We're done.
Cheers.
I'll go home. Cheers.
Great non-cringe times had by all. What a dinner. What a time to hang out. Guys, not a lot of time left. It's good. Brian, your prediction remaining the same for the weekend?
Yeah, I'm not going to change a thing. I, called Rosti at the start of the weekend. Definitely think that he has what it takes to go all the way.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with mine as well. I am officially a Knight of Cydonia. I am totally buying into this. I'm going to get my point on that prediction board. Dan, who do you got?
So I think Napoleon has convinced me that he's definitely a contender for it. So I'm going to pick Napoleon. I even add a little accent because I think he's going to add a nice little finish to his play today.
Dan, that's very cultural. You are a very well-read man. So we have our predictions. Want to know who out there you guys have winning it all, though? Tweet us using that hashtag HCT at PlayHearthstone, at any of us personally on Twitter. We will be out there answering those tweets. That's going to wrap it up for the pre-show. It's time to kick off the final day of the America's Spring Championship.
After 3 months of competition, the America's Spring season now comes to an epic conclusion. We've seen the world's top Hearthstone players compete with strategy and wit as competitors rise and fall in emotional victories. Now it's time to crown a new champion. 8 players from across the Americas have battled to earn their chance at glory and a share of the $100,000 prize pool. Pull up a chair and catch all the action. The Hearthstone America's Spring Championship begins right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is CJ. I'm sitting by here at the fireside with the 2 players that will be competing in the first semifinal match. It's Napoleon and Cydonia. I'm going to get a few words with them before they jump into the action. But Cydonia, I'm going to come to you first. What's your game plan coming in today? Is there anything that you're particularly worried about?
The only thing I'm worried about is how I'm going to get the trophy back home, since it's pretty big and I'm not sure it fits in my luggage.
Wow, confidence. I like it. And Napoleon, how did you prepare for your matches last night?
I prepared by practicing with Cydonia decks with one of my friends before the event at the hotel.
All right, so you got a good idea of his decks going in. All right, well, the players are ready, so it's time to jump in. Guys, shake hands and jump into the match. There you go. Take your seats. There we go. And before we jump into the match, we're going to take a look at what these guys had to say about each other.
I think I made a few mistakes in my last match, but I played well besides that.
And Napoleon is going to move on to the semifinals.
Cydonia is going to defeat Dear Jason and move on to the semifinals of the American Spring Championship.
It was a super close match. It went to 7 games and it was super intense.
I haven't prepared against Cydonia yet. I'm going to ask one of my friends to play Cydonia's decks against me in a practice match.
He doesn't have a hunter, but he has freeze mage instead, so that was like the flex slot that they can lose sometimes. So I'm sure he's very confident with it, but that's one way I'm gonna approach is really try to get someone against freeze mage.
So I'm confident I can beat Cydonia.
This is not the end of the adventure. I'm gonna win 2 more games tomorrow.
My man Cydonia, with that confidence, believes he's going to bring back the trophy. Cora, you excited to cast this one?
Absolutely. I'm excited to get right into the games today. We're casting semifinal number 1 right now. Semifinal number 2 coming up after. And then, of course, the grand final is going to finish off today. So really exciting to see who's going to be taking home that trophy.
Yeah, we see the bands there at the bottom. Cydonia will not have that Dragon Warrior. Napoleon will not have his Zulok. I think it's a very interesting matchup because when Napoleon was coming into this weekend, he was saying how he expected everyone to be bringing Hunter and Cthulhu Druid. And as we look at Cydonia's roster, that's exactly what he brought. So Cydonia playing right into Napoleon's hands, and now it's just going to be a matter of can Napoleon live up to that claim of pretty much playing flawlessly and advance to the grand finals later today.
Well, you know what? We saw some really great play from him yesterday. So I think as long as he can keep up doing what he was doing, then there's absolutely a great chance he can take this.
Yeah, I definitely like what I saw from Napoleon. Obviously, still pulling for Cydonia on my end for very personal and selfish reasons. But we're going to hop into game 1 here. We see Cydonia rocking out that Hunter, and Napoleon's going to be bringing his Tempo Warrior. So Napoleon sticking with the Tempo Warrior, whereas a lot of players have kind of migrated to Dragon Warrior. We see Varian Rin kind of the telltale sign of this more mainstream build of the deck, which obviously uses a lot of big tempo cards, draw cards through Battle Rage, and then Varian Rin can kind of be that late game bomb, which especially against a Hunter, if Varian Rin gets reasonable results, we actually saw it yesterday.
Yes, we did.
That is a huge thing for the Hunter to get there, and a lot of times just spells the end of the match.
Absolutely. Whereas the Dragon Warrior, which we've seen a little bit more of in this tournament, is definitely faster. The traditional Tempo Warrior that has, late games such as Karen Bloodhoof, Varian Rin, occasionally Archthief or Fom we've seen a little bit here and there, tends to just exist more on that card draw. It really curves out very well and very strong, even has a little bit of armor gain. So it's still definitely weak to the mid-range Hunter. The mid-range Hunter sort of preys on the Tempo Warrior, which is why it's become so popular on ladder. But Napoleon has a pretty good hand, so I'm not going to count him out just yet.
Yeah, we see the greetings exchange there. Cydonia mulliganed a lot of his hand, ended up getting the Savannah High main back, along with some other cards as well. But I think having that Savannah High main in this matchup is something you feel really good about in the opening hand. I think you want to have that High main right on 6. You just want to play it down. It gives Warriors fits because of all the resources you have to spend on it. It even has the Elec, which is a great play, obviously, on turn 2.
Especially against the Tempo Warrior, which usually only runs Execute as the hard removal. They don't use Shield Slam, they don't use Shield Block. The Savannah High main is even more difficult to deal with than if you were playing Control Warrior. So definitely want to have it on 6, and then if you can have something else on 7, maybe a Stranglethorn Tiger, and then Call of the Wild right on 8 is where the Hunter really shines in this matchup.
Yeah, there's the Huffer right on time. Now, Napoleon drew Bloodhoof Brave, which is amazing to have it right now because he has the coin. Gonna be able to play it down immediately, and this is going to be well before Stampeding Kodo can come out, which Cydonia is running 1 copy of, and Napoleon has to be aware of, especially given the time he put in last night to make sure that he tested against Cydonia's lists.
Absolutely. We see some interesting text in Cydonia's list. He does have 1 Freezing Trap, 1 Tracking, and only 1 Stampeding Kodo, but 2 Stranglethorn Tigers. So those Tigers are actually going to be really great in this matchup because the Tempo Warrior doesn't run Brawl, so there's no way to remove the Tiger before it gets some sort of value.
Yeah, we see the tracking coming out. I have to imagine Cydonia was looking for Deadly Shot because that Bloodhoof Brave is very difficult to remove otherwise. He could still look at possibly equipping an Eaglehorn bow and killing it over 2 turns, but not only is that going to use the entirety of the bow, he's going to take so much damage doing it, but otherwise, how do you get it off the board? Because Napoleon's not going to play into a freezing trap.
No, I doubt that he will, especially since he, like we said, he's been playtesting against Cydonia's decks with friends. He obviously has studied the list in depth, so he knows exactly what the secret is going to be. This is a tough choice for Cydonia. You definitely want the second Savannah High main in the matchup. That's actually what he's going to end up going with. And looks like he's just going to equip the bow and then sit on it. So maybe he will put up the freezing trap and try to slow down Napoleon a bit, but with those 2 armor smiths, that's not really going to work out very well.
Yeah, Cydonia looking at his hand and realizing, you know, I have that 6 high main, I have the 7 high main, I have the 8 Call the Wild. His mid to late game is looking really good, so he might just think, like, I don't necessarily need to deal with the Bloodhoof Brave now, or, you know, start putting out a lot of pressure, and even draws the 2nd Call the Wild. Oh, once he gets to 6, this is going to be, next turn, just a brutal series of events.
6, 7, 8, 9 is looking fantastic for him, but the fact that he was unable to do anything on turn 5, just had to play Freezing Trap and Hero Power, really, really bad for him, especially since he has, you know, Stampeding Kodo, 2 Stranglethorn Tigers, tons and tons of 4-drops in the deck. So having nothing to play on turn 5, I feel like really gives Napoleon an advantage, even though his health is already getting pretty low.
Yeah, that Frothing Berserker is going to be tucked away safely behind the Bloodhoof Brave, and now Cydonia does have to start thinking about, you know, how do I deal with this Frothing Berserker? Because what feels best right now, and what we are going to see, is that Savannah High main, but Frothing Berserker can get pretty big pretty quickly.
Fortunately for Cydonia, Napoleon doesn't have a Ravaging Ghoul, he doesn't have Whirlwind in hand, so Frothing Berserker going to gain several attack points, but nothing too crazy right now. He's actually going to use it just to go ahead and trade off into those Hyenas, so Savannah High main being dealt with very easily by Napoleon. Even gets a 3-card Battle Rage off of it.
Yeah, this is, you know, it's a little bit deceptive when you say that mid-range Hunter preys on Tempo Warrior, because it absolutely can. You know, once it gets to those high-pressure turns, if the Hunter is ahead on board and not behind, you know, it takes the board very quickly and usually ends the match in a couple turns. But, you know, we saw Napoleon with being able to leverage the coin and that Bloodhoof Brave, and that just put up a wall against Cydonia, who is going to start finding some answers to deal with not just 1 Frothing Berserker now, but 2.
Yeah, really not looking too great for Cydonia. The Hunter is traditionally favored in this matchup, but Napoleon was able to leverage those first couple of turns, remove Cydonia's early game. Tracking was a bit of a miss for Cydonia, and then of course not having anything to play on turn 5 just really set him back a little bit too much. He's going to be able to clear off both minions with Unleash the Hounds, but he's going to have to take a little bit damage doing so.
Yeah, but he will, once, you know, this is cleared up, he'll be able to get into those Call the Wild, Savannah High main turns. And if you're Napoleon, you're looking at those 3 cards in hand, and you're probably listing off 3 cards you don't want them to be. And it's exactly those 3 cards. Napoleon could just drop down Malkorok here, which, let's see what he gets. All right, so it's just going to be that Poisoned Blade,
okay.
which...
it's not terrible.
No, there are some situations where I think Poisoned Blade is actually pretty reasonable. I'm not sure this is one of them, though, because obviously it takes a few turns to get to that point. We actually just see him swing with it immediately, and Napoleon gives a shake of the head as he does see that turn 9 Call the Wild, or turn 8 rather, Call the Wild come out.
Yeah, and once again, it seems like this game has flip-flopped back into Cydonia's favor. He was pretty behind. Napoleon had taken a couple of turns to capitalize and build his own board, but just being able to clear Napoleon's board with that kill command, Unleash the Hounds, and then the Eaglehorn bow that he had put up already, was able to bring the game back into his favor. So now he does have that 2nd Call of the Wild, which I imagine we'll see come down. And Napoleon just not happy to see that, obviously, but what can you really do?
Now, we even saw him bring out the Grom and start trading out with the Misha there. And Napoleon's playing these turns very quickly, as is Cydonia. So it's kind of one of those things where he knew exactly what he was going to do. Not having Brawl in this deck, as is something which is a hallmark of Tempo Warrior, means that you do have to trade very honestly with the board. You have those executes which can cheat you out a little bit of tempo, but otherwise you are kind of forced to mostly play a minion-based trade game.
Yeah, the Tempo Warrior really shines against decks like Zoo because of all the Whirlwind effects, the early removal with Fiery War Axe, Blood to Ichor. It's really able to curb that early aggression very easily. Even, you know, decent against something like Aggro Shaman because there is just enough armor gain with Armor Smith and the hero power and those Whirlwind effects that you're able to sort of play a little bit more defensively. But against the Hunter, which can just curve out very easily and then, you know, get several minions on the board in the late game, it's very hard to deal with for the Warrior. So even though it looked like Napoleon was, you know, pretty favorable in the middle of the match, it's definitely starting to seem like it will be very hard to pull back for him.
Let's see what he goes and does. Uses those 2 Blood to Ickers and goes ahead and plays down Corcoran Elite and Fierce Monkey. So is able to build a pretty reasonable board here. The 2 Leox on the board will be worrying, especially if something like a second Unleash the Hounds comes out. Sidonia's not running it though, so not going to be too much of an issue for Napoleon, having already seen the one. And Cydonia does still have the Savannah High main, so he chooses to go and play it this turn. Get some Misha. I feel like between the 2
for the 3rd Leoc there.
Yeah, the old trifecta, triple Leoc. We've now seen both Animal Companions and both Call of the Wild, so all of Rexar's friends have come out and played.
All right, Cydonia does have the 2nd Savannah High main, which Napoleon doesn't have any easy way of clearing.
Again, Napoleon just shaking his head. He's like, he couldn't have thought of a worse sequence of cards to have to deal with in the double Savannah High main, double Call of the Wild. But Napoleon just keeps on trucking and trying to deal with this. Unfortunately, this final Savannah High main looks like it could absolutely be problematic.
Playing very quickly, but also very cleanly. That sequencing there was really nice. Traded off the Blood to Icker after playing the Armor Smith, and then played both Ravaging Ghouls. So I wouldn't say that his speedy play is affecting his play at all. It just seems like he already knows sort of where this game's going and wants to play it out, of course, but maybe not delay the inevitable too much.
Sure, and looking at what Cydonia is up against now, he does see that either of those Ravaging Ghouls will be able to trade into the initial body of the High main. With your opponent at 18 health, I think it's time to equip that bow, hit that hero power, play the Infested Wolf, and just start going face. I don't know at this point if you really start trading down with the Ravaging Ghouls.
I feel like that Armor Smith is a very high priority target. I think you might want to bow down the Armor Smith and then go face.
Sure.
And then I definitely like the Infested Wolf as well.
Oh, so he is going to go ahead and trade here. Yeah, he's going to put the
either way.
High main. Okay. Realizes that he does have minions in hand, and, Napoleon's sitting on 1 card. Decides he's going to go ahead and trade. Obviously, I like the face plan, but Cydonia is the better player by
this
far.
plan is definitely better for the longer game, because now if he can build out the board, he's challenging Napoleon's board better, so he's leveraging 6 damage to face on that turn by saying, I will most likely be able to get more than 6 damage with the High main in the following turns. But Napoleon managed to draw that Execute, which actually worked out really nicely for him. And Cairn Bloodhoof, very difficult for Cydonia to remove. The question is whether he can ignore it, because he's also only at 14 health.
I mean, yeah, you're at a point now where Hunter as a class doesn't really have any super powerful draw mechanisms. Like, he's at the point where if he draws Quick Shot in the next couple turns, it's going to net him a 2nd card. But if Napoleon manages to get a Battle Rage and draw a bunch of cards in the next turn or two, this could quickly go against him. So has to decide what he wants to do here. If he even feels, he could use the Deadly Shot and work it in a way to where he gets rid of the first part of Cairn Bloodhoof, but I still expend a lot of resources this way.
Cydonia, having used both Savannah High mains, both Call of the Wilds, doesn't really have any large minions left in the deck. He does still have those Tigers, but Napoleon still has Ragnaros the Fire Lord and Varian Rin, as well as a 2nd Bloodhoof Brave, I believe. So he does have some really favorable draws coming up, along with that 2nd Battle Rage. So yeah, see, there's the 2nd Bloodhoof Brave. It's sort of, at this point, the battle of who can just top deck a little bit better. If Cydonia can get those Tigers quickly, then he might be able to edge this game out.
Yeah, I think he's gonna hope that Deadly Shot just kills the Bloodhoof Brave. But looking back on that turn where Cydonia elected to trade into the Armor Smith, swing the bow into one of those Ravaging Ghouls, obviously we were able to see that there's a Cairn Bloodhoof in hand. And I think if Cydonia had seen that, he probably would have just decided, all right, I'm just going for the face on this one. Ooh, unfortunate on the Deadly Shot there.
But fortunate for Napoleon.
Right. Yeah, that's a great thing for him. And yeah, this Bloodhoof Brave is going to be very difficult for Cydonia to get through. As you've said, he's pretty much exhausted all of his power plays.
Well, that Whirlwind turns that Bloodhoof Brave into a 5/5 taunt minion, so Napoleon going to be able to clear off those spiders and deal 5 more damage to the face. Cydonia needs something right now to be able to deal with this. A Quick Shot off the top to kill the Bloodhoof combined with the Huge Toad, and then the 1 damage killing the Cairn, but that Stampeding Kodo is just too late, and that's not going to do it. Cydonia has no way to remove these minions, and Napoleon is going to be able to take game 1. What a swinging game.
Yeah, it just goes to show, when you go into these matchups and you say, okay, one of these things is definitively favored versus the other, you still got to play that game. You still have to get the draws. And Napoleon, to his credit, he survived 2 Call of the Wilds, 2 Savannah High mains to get to this point. Cydonia just going to go ahead and draw this one out a little bit longer. I kind of wonder, Cydonia, 31, older guy as far as the competitive scene goes, and he's very laid back and not necessarily prone to being nervous. And I kind of wonder if this is one of those things where he's potentially just slow rolling this to get inside Napoleon's head just a little bit.
I wonder. I mean, I have to question. Napoleon is sort of known for some of his bad manners behavior in the preliminaries. Maybe Cydonia, I don't know, he could have been just taking a moment to take a breather. He knows that he's lost that game. He knows that he's got to go and win 4 more games now. Maybe he was just taking a moment to compose himself, or maybe it could have been a little bit of mind games. I don't know. I doubt that's going to get to Napoleon. I think he's too good of a player. He's too consistent of a player to let that really get to him.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. Cydonia has advertised himself as someone who, while not looking to make a career out of Hearthstone, really values and praises high skill level, perfect levels of play. And we had a chance to talk to him just a little bit about what it's like being a perfectionist when it comes to gaming.
So yeah, I'm really a perfectionist. When I play a game, I always try to play like perfectly. I just like the challenge. I like to feel that I'm always learning new things. I've never been a fan of tic-tac-toe because you play 2 games and you already know how to play perfectly. A lot of times I will play fun games with friends and I have to tone down that side because they don't care if you play perfectly, they just want to have fun. I would say there's like a few players who are closer to perfect, and even sometimes I will think I will have played perfectly, but someone who was watching me said, oh, that turn you should have done that other play, and then I can consider it and then we can discuss it. You cannot play like every single game you play perfectly because you will get some decisions that it will be like too difficult to calculate. So maybe someday a machine will do it, but I don't think a person can possibly do it.
Cydonia advertises himself as a perfectionist, but is going to need not just perfection, but really to draw cards like Kodo when the Bloodhoof Brave comes out. So that's one of the elements of Hearthstone that certainly makes it different than other games is that chance element where, you know, you can have those cards in your deck, those tech cards that are designed specifically to deal with certain things, but, you know, if you don't get them when you get them, you start having to make hard calls, and that's where the decision making really comes in. We saw him have to deal with that early Bloodhoof Brave.
Well, I think it's maybe a combination of that and possibly a bit too defensive play as the Hunter player. He had several opportunities to go face and maybe push a little bit more damage, but unfortunately it just didn't work out for him, whatever the factors may have been. And now we're going to be going into game number 2, Napoleon with his Freeze Mage versus Cydonia's Zoo Warlock.
Yeah, and this is the matchup that is very much right where the Freeze Mage wants to be, going up against a deck like Zoo, which is so board-centric, and Napoleon has thus far navigated the Freeze Mage matches really expertly. And, you know, we were talking yesterday about the fact that prolific Rogue players and prolific Freeze Mage players, they're part of this exclusive club of players who believe that they're just better at the game than every other player. And a lot of times it comes back to a point where, you know, things don't pan out so well and they have to kind of eat a little bit of crow on that. But, yeah, Napoleon thus far has shown Freeze Mage is a deck he's more than capable of playing.
I don't know that I would say that they're better than every other player just because they know how to play Freeze Mage, but because they know how to play Freeze Mage is an indicator that they have this higher level of thinking, the really technical skill required to play the game well. So I think it's that great players tend to gravitate towards these decks rather than playing these decks makes you great, if that makes any sense at all. It did in my head.
I feel like we got to the same point. Mine just
There you
took
go.
slightly less words, but
No matter what you look at it, this is a very favorable matchup for the Freeze Mage.
Absolutely.
The Zulak has a very hard time winning this match unless it has a very strong start and manages to somehow evade all of the Freeze Mage's freeze cards, which is very difficult to do considering you have 2 Blizzards, 2 Frost Novas, a Flame Strike, 2 Doomsayers for tempo, which we do see in Napoleon's hand right now. Cydonia does have a pretty good start. He's got a 1-drop on 1, 2 1-drops on 2, and then Darkshire Councilman for 3. But depending which order he plays these in, could affect the game.
yeah, and unfortunately Cydonia is just playing a more traditional Zoo build, not the new Zoo build that's taking all the kids by storm. TJ Sanders Yogg Zoo.
Oh, what a deck.
So unfortunately, does not have Yogg Saron to possibly bail him out. And Napoleon has double Doomsayer opening and knows that Cydonia doesn't have any silence. You know, Ironbeak Owl was occasionally an include in Zoo back in the day prior to it being brought to 3 mana. So he can play those Doomsayers down and keep the board favorable for himself really for the next few turns.
Yeah, the only way Cydonia would have been able to have a minion left on board were he to have played the Possessed Villager on turn 1 instead of the Flame Imp. But that would have been a really nice read on the Doomsayer, but I don't think this is catastrophic for the Zoo in any way. To lose a turn on turn 2, however, could make a huge impact. It's definitely not something you want to see.
Well, and it's something when you're playing Zoo, one of the ways you can actually win this is to just go super fast. And maybe the Mage does, the Mage doesn't have Mad Scientist anymore. It's not just going to get a free tempo secret off a minion. So Freeze Mage is forced to play a little bit more slowly. So if you can develop a board that does a lot of damage and is going to start applying pressure, then that's one way you can look at potentially winning this.
Cydonia has actually teched a Crazed Alchemist into his Zoo deck exactly for this situation against the Doomsayer. Unfortunately, doesn't have it right now, which would have been really, really great for him. Napoleon does have the second Doomsayer in hand, so essentially he's just going to be able to have all the time in the world to draw cards. He's got his secret Ice Block in hand already. So yeah, definitely looking like the Freeze Mage is having the free reign to do exactly what it wants to do.
Yeah, he could even look at potentially just putting out the Doomsayer, to block the turn 3 play, but I like this one better. Just go ahead and get that ping in. Didn't have enough mana, unfortunately, to play something like Ice Block, and Cydonia is going back to what will probably be a recurring theme over the course of this match, repopulating an empty board on his side.
Napoleon, having played that first Doomsayer for a little bit of tempo, definitely wants to be maybe a bit more greedy with the second one, save it to combo with something like a Frost Nova, with something like a Blizzard later on in the game. So for now, I like him keeping it in hand. He does have the Forgotten Torch for removal if he needs it, but that Ice Block gives him a little bit of a safety net. The Zulak has some options this turn. He can play the Darkshire Councilman. Dark Peddler is also a decent option, can give you cards like Soulfire, which are really great in this matchup because it gives you just that little bit of additional burn damage to face from the hand, whereas if you get Power Overwhelming, something like that, your board tends to be frozen or really full the entire time, so that might be a little bit more difficult to actually use.
Yeah, we were discussing, he ultimately ends up playing the Darkshire Councilman, but we were discussing yesterday that when it comes to the aggressive decks, people might look at it and go, oh, it's, turn 3, you have all these cards, you just jam them down, it's very easy. But when you have that many decisions to make, each decision kind of represents a different line of play. And Darkshire Councilman is overall going to be the most possible power in the next few turns as you play minions, as you start boosting its attack. And that's the line he's shown thus far. Cydonia has, when it comes to his playmaking, he wants to just start putting the pressure on the Freeze Mage, start bringing down Napoleon's life total, and force him to have very specific answers each turn as opposed to maybe some of the cards that are more useful later or in securing a win condition.
All right, Napoleon is actually going to ensure that this Darkshire Councilman gets removed off the board, not only with the Doomsayer, which I think might have been enough because there isn't actually any direct damage in hand, but it's not going to be enough now because Cydonia top decks that Crazed Alchemist, so that Ice Lance was essentially wasted this turn. I mean, it negates 3 damage. I think it's going to be 3 or 4 damage depending on whether or not Cydonia plays Crazed Alchemist with a Peddler with 2 1-drops, but that is a really, really nice draw for him.
Yeah, it's nice to see him get that on time. Obviously, the Stampeding Kodo, as I was saying earlier, was pretty late to the party as one of those big tech cards that can just swing the game in your favor. But Crazed Alchemist does arrive, and Cydonia can choose to use it. Have to think he will. I mean, there's really nothing else he can really use it against in Napoleon's deck.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to use it on? An Acolyte of Pain to make it a 3-1? A Novice Engineer? Alexstrasza? Like, they're just really no good targets. It's exactly in this deck for the Doomsayer, so I'd be very surprised if he chose not to play it at this time.
All right, let's see what he chooses. Yeah, we are going to see that Crazed Alchemist come out of that. Again, there really nothing else he was going to use it on this deck, and Napoleon kind of puts his head in his hands a little bit. Obviously was hoping, you know, after the first Doomsayer went off, that Crazed Alchemist would just not come off the top, but Cydonia does get the runner there, and suddenly Cydonia is ready to start pressing the aggression.
Yeah, very unlucky for Napoleon there, especially since he did choose to use that Ice Lance to ensure that the board would be cleared, but did not work out for him, and now he loses on that board clear, and he loses that Ice Lance as well. So that's really, you know, just going to be really detrimental to his game plan in the late game, and now he is falling behind. Cydonia doing exactly what the Zoo wants to do, and Napoleon not having picked up any of those freeze cards yet. He does have Flame Strike, but that is still a couple of turns away.
Yeah, and Cydonia can start using those Dark Peddlers to start trying to look for things like Power Overwhelming, Soul Fires, things that are going to help him just go ahead and close out the game. Gets a Leper Gnome, and unfortunately these days Leper Gnome is just not the powerhouse one-drop it used to be, but will still do some damage to Napoleon.
Yeah, it's certainly better than the Murloc Tidecaller in this case.
Yeah.
It's going to do 2 damage to face, and, you know, I never thought I would say this, but maybe it's just a little bit nice to see him back.
I have always enjoyed the company of Leper Gnomes. They're nice guys, just want to hug, and also do 2s of damage to you. Let's see when he gets off the second Peddler. Mortal Coil, Abusive Sergeant, goes ahead and takes the Mortal Coil and takes that over the Abusive Sergeant. I kind of wonder, to me, I would have taken the Abusive Sergeant there because it just represents more damage overall, especially if he's going to trade into the Novice Engineer. Why do you potentially take the Mortal Coil over the Abusive Sergeant in that situation?
So Cydonia knows that Napoleon is running 2 Novice Engineers. He's running Acolyte of Pain, so he does have a couple of potential Mortal Coil targets. They're not the best Mortal Coil targets, but in this case, he only has 4 cards in hand, and he's going to be playing most of these cards every turn that he gets the chance because he has, you know, already 6 mana, and most of the cards are very low mana cost cards. So in this case, he'll likely be tapping every so often, pretty much every turn in the late game, and he needs to keep up that board advantage. He needs to keep up that aggression. So the Mortal Coil, yes, it does 1 damage to a minion. It's likely going to remove this Novice Engineer that we see in Napoleon's hand, but more importantly, it is going to cycle. So I think in this case, the card draw, potentially drawing into something like Leroy Jenkins or Power Overwhelming, is more valuable to Cydonia than just having the 2 damage from the Abusive Sergeant.
Yeah, something I had considered is maybe with that Mortal Coil, he could use it to, you know, potentially cycle off one of his own minions. But at this point, you've already played the Crazed Alchemist, and you're not running Silences, so really the big things that you'd be looking to potentially have a spot on your board for are not there. So I think I like your explanation best, and Cydonia has already got Napoleon pretty far down in health and does draw that Leroy Jenkins, which is a potential finisher.
Actually, Rob, I think your point is very valid as well. As the Zoo deck, you have to be very wary of filling up your board entirely, and we do see that Cydonia has filled it up and now can't play something like the Leroy Jenkins unless he does trade off the minions, which he does have the luxury of doing, so it's not a huge problem here. But if Napoleon had something like Frost Nova, for instance, and had played it, then Cydonia would have essentially nothing to do this turn except Mortal Coiling a Novice Engineer. So it's not going to backfire on him this time, but you generally want to leave 1 slot open on your board if you have the luxury of doing so.
Yeah, no, now, especially with that Leroy, that's a fair point right there, is being able to play down the Leroy if your entire board is frozen. Cydonia going to be able to easily pop the board and also get rid of the Novice Engineer, and Napoleon is far, far away from that Alexstrasza. Will have the access to Flame Strike, but
I don't think it's going to be enough.
Yeah, if he pops the Leper Gnome does 2 damage, and even then the Possessed Villager would leave behind a 1/1.
Yeah, this is just going to be Cydonia's game. The Zoo deck did exactly what it needed to do here. It populated the board consistently, and Napoleon unfortunately just didn't get any of those freezes. If that Doomsayer had a chance to go off on the Darkshire Councilman, then he would certainly be in a much better position here. Does pick up Ice Block, so he's going to have 1 more turn. Let's see how he can do this. He still can't kill Leper Gnome this turn because he will just be dead. Secrets don't activate on your turn.
Yeah, just going to play out the Forgotten Torch, start playing to potentially some sort of damage win condition, but we see all he has in hand at this point is Ice Lance and Frostbolt, which is far, far away from the 19 damage he would need to deal.
I'm wondering what his game plan is, because if he Flame Strikes next turn, it's still going to leave Argent Squire with 1 attack and 1 health, no Divine Shield, and a 1/1 Possessed Villager. So he could have potentially used hero power on the possessed villager or used hero power on the divine shield and looked to remove the entire board, but the leper gnome still would have just been lethal there. So instead, he picks up that Frost Nova and he's just going for it.
Yeah, he's going to be real disappointed to see that Mortal Coil. That poor leper gnome is about to get sacrificed, but that is going to ice out the game for Cydonia. Could even power overwhelming if he chose to. I remember back in the 2014 Americas Championship, we saw a little bit of that on the leper gnome, but yeah, that's going to go ahead and do it. Tie up the series. And yeah, this is just the power of Crazed Alchemist, because I think without Crazed Alchemist flipping that situation, Cydonia was able to secure a relatively large board. That Darkshire Councilman put in so much damage, and yeah, that pretty much made the game for Cydonia.
Yeah, Napoleon was able to get a couple of nice draws there at the end with the second Ice Block and the Frost Nova, but just coming a little bit too late. Nothing really going his way that game, and unfortunately, sometimes that's just how the match goes. Considering the Zoo deck was teched, especially against the Freeze Mage, in this case with the Crazed Alchemist, I think Cydonia has to be really happy about that win.
Yeah, this is now both players have gotten kind of unfavored wins for their first wins of the series, so probably a little bit of a confidence boost for both of them. Again, tie series, plenty of daylight for both of these players. So Napoleon, starts out as someone who's watching Hearthstone on Twitch. He's a viewer. He's seeing all these players play in tournaments. Feels like he can do it better. Feels like he can be a competitor. So let's get to know him a little bit better when it comes to that.
One of the most fun things about a Hearthstone match is that you watch these games and you think, maybe one day I can do something like that. That's exactly what Napoleon did.
I was a normal viewer watching a lot of Hearthstone streamers and a lot of Hearthstone tournaments, and I saw a lot of players making questionable plays that I would never make, and I thought I could do better than those players at those tournaments.
He had one goal in mind when entering the Americas preliminary, to not make a single mistake.
Good game, it happened.
Wow, the double fist bump.
I'm surprised he's not got up and done a victory lap for this one now, as Napoleon is gonna book his spot in the top 8. Well,
sup, Dan?
Hey.
Not much, man. That was some entertaining Hearthstone.
Super hard to do, and if he's here in the championship, let's see if he can do it again.
So here I am now. I never thought I would make it here, but I'm here. I don't think I'm at a disadvantage for my lack of tournament experience, because every player here has a lack of live tournament experience as well. I think I can do better than they do. And now that I'm here, I will show that I can play. I will play flawlessly.
Napoleon's story, a really cool one, I think. Being out there watching and thinking anything, these people can do, I can do better, and I see very obvious ways to do it better. And that's one of the things that makes Hearthstone kind of cool, is the cerebral aspect of it. So you can just sit there and be watching and be like, oh yeah, I had a different line of play for this. I could have done it differently. And to see Napoleon go from where he was to this point, where he's top 8 at the American Spring Championship, is really cool.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that, because I was in his shoes just a few months ago. I was watching all the casters and thinking, I wish I could do that, and now here I am. I'm doing it, so it's really, really actually inspirational.
Yeah, I kind of hope, you know, I was watching the NBA Finals and a lot of LeBron, and, you know, I'm watching a lot of LeBron. I'm kind of hoping I can do the
You
same
can go
thing.
do that.
Dan and I were playing basketball the other day. I can't. I
A
cannot.
couple of layups, you never know. All right, but it's going to be Cydonia's Shaman versus Napoleon's Cthulhu Druid.
Yeah, Napoleon, again, predicting a lot of players will be bringing Cthulhu Druid and Hunter. Brings his own Cthulhu Druid. Mulch is an interesting inclusion, which a lot of players don't necessarily seem to be, I guess, sorted on whether or not that is the correct inclusion. But Mulch gives Druid kind of the unique ability to just instantly destroy a minion, which they otherwise don't have. It's all by the numbers with Swipe, Wrath, and those kind of spells. Very curious to see if that pays off for him here.
Yeah, with Big Game Hunter being out of the meta now, Mulch would be really useful against something like Cydonia's Flame Wreathed Faceless. So we're actually going to see if that's going to work out for him. He does decide to mulligan it, but maybe it'll come in hand later.
Yeah, it's definitely something where, you know, it gets a lot more value, I would think, in control matchups or even more mid-range matchups, whereas Cydonia's Shaman is pretty straightforward. It's just there to, you know, punch you in the face until you have 0 health. So Flame Wraith Faceless is basically the only target in the deck that you might really see much value from Mulch off of. But Cydonia's mulligan, not the best. Finley Murgleton is certainly fine, but it's one of those things where I think you'd prefer to have the Trog and the Totem Golem. Has a Flame Tongue Totem, which will allow him to probably trade that Finley Murgleton up in the next turn or two, though.
Yeah, it's not the worst hand I've ever seen. It definitely would be much worse if he couldn't play anything on turns 1, 2, and 3. So he does have some plays to make. Depending on what hero power this Finley gives him, that could advance his plays in the next couple of turns. But Napoleon's hand is looking really nice as well. That Disciple of Cthulhu giving him some much-needed removal. Twilight Elder, just a nice 3/4 body. Innervate, of course, to use with that Druid of the Claw, preferably in taunt form, I would think. So, yeah, definitely some options for both guys here.
Yeah, I think we are just going to see Twilight Elder come out from Napoleon. He's already thumbing over the Innervate, but taking his time, making sure he thinks it through. And I like that because Napoleon has, up until this point, been taking relatively quick turns. So for him to slow it down just a little bit and start figuring out what he wants to do, I'm definitely a big fan of that. Cydonia, again, with those Flame Tongue Totem. Oh, Napoleon passes. Okay.
All right. Okay, yeah, definitely looked like he was going to use that Innervate to play the Twilight Elder, which would have challenged the Finley really nicely, would have given him +1/+1 on his Cthulhu, but decides, I guess, that Innervate is more important, might want to play it with the Druid of the Claw. Next turn could actually play Druid of the Claw plus coin, or sorry, Innervate plus coin on Druid of the Claw. Oh, my apologies. And then on turn 3 would end up being able to play that Twilight Elder or Disciple, so it curves him out just a little bit better there.
Yeah, I think it also allows him to get more information. I mean, the Finley is not going to be putting out a lot of pressure by itself initially. You know, if that had been a Tunnel Trog, maybe you would have seen the answer be more immediate. But in this situation, he can wait to see kind of what Cydonia's hand looked like, and it looks like rather. And, you know, for Napoleon, this is a very obvious tell. When you see the Flame Tongue Totem come out and it's not for a trade, it's just to push damage, you know a lot about your opponent's hand in that moment.
Yeah, he can definitely make some reads. There's no Tunnel Trog, there's no Totem Golem, so knows what he has to be afraid of, knows what he doesn't have to worry about at this point, and realizes he can actually take this game at his own pace. So he's going to go ahead and actually charge that Druid of the Claw and just kill off that Flame Tongue Totem. I really like that.
Yeah, that was an incredibly solid play, and it could have been what Napoleon was prepping for, waiting to see if a Totem Golem came out on 2, or if it was something like a Flame Tongue Totem, because obviously the hero power is now Shapeshift, so you're not going to see a normal totem there. So I really like that read from Napoleon, and this is something he's done all of his tournament performance thus far, is just show off those high-level plays.
Yeah, I really like that he waited here. I think, especially at this stage of a tournament, you want to take as much time as you can, think through all of your possible plays, and he initially seemed like he was going to go with one and ended up making a completely different play, which worked out much better for him. So definitely can appreciate taking his time a little bit here.
Yeah, Cydonia doesn't actually have a way to clear this Druid of the Claw. So he's going to play Finley down, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Horse Rider follow up just because it has Divine Shield and can just begin charging. But yeah, Napoleon's in a really good spot for this matchup, where a lot of times the Cthulhu Druid can be a little slow, and the Shaman can kind of abuse it. But yeah, that Innervate into the Druid of the Claw has really made this a very favorable matchup at this point for Napoleon.
Especially in the turns going forward. He has Disciple of Cthulhu coming up, which will be really great against that Tuskar Totemic if Cydonia chooses to play it this turn. Azure Drake on 5 and Dark Arakoa on 6. And once the Cthulhu Druid gets to those later stages and can play taunt minions like the Dark Arakoa, like the Ancient of War, it's so difficult for the Shaman to actually come back and be able to deal the damage it needs to win the game.
Yeah, and that's where cards like Elemental Destruction and Hex can be really big, but Cydonia's not running any of those. This is just purely the aggro shaman, so playing something like a mid-range Cthulhu Druid where, to your point, you get out those big taunts, can be absolutely devastating. See what this Tuskar Totemic does. It's just going to bring out the Searing Totem, which I've made a joke to a couple of casters. I feel like I never see this card. I feel like, or never see this totem off the Tuskar Totemic. I almost exclusively see Totem Golem, but you know, there it is. There's the downside.
Occasionally, you get a Flame Tongue Totem.
Sure, and honestly, Searing Totem...
Sometimes you get a Spell Damage Totem, you know.
Searing Totem isn't even a bad result in this one. I think you probably feel better about it than, say,
a Healing Totem.
Or even a Stoneclaw Totem at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, but Napoleon just easily able to trade out this board and just kind of bide his time. The Cthulhu is growing, and, you know, as you said, he's going into those Dark Arakoa turns relatively quickly, and I think once the Dark Arakoas come out, that's pretty much the chains on Cydonia's chances of winning this one.
Yeah, going to be really tough for him, but he does have the ability to clear this board this turn with the inclusion of that Rockbiter weapon that he just picked up. He can do a couple of different things. He could actually use that Rockbiter with the Thing from Below in hand that only costs 4 mana and run the Argent Squire and the Totem into the Disciple of Cthulhu and the Druid of the Claw, and then just use the Rockbiter to clean up the Twilight Elder, and then go ahead and play down Thing from Below and actually have board with a 5/5 taunt minion.
Yeah, and that's usually something that card specifically gives Druid problems because there isn't a really convenient way to deal with it. Swipe does 4 damage. That is just usually the way it has to go is something like Swipe Hero Power or Swipe with, you know, the help of an additional minion. But yeah, I think that's the exact line of play he's going to be going for. Just go ahead, use those minions to trade, and then play down the Thing from Below there. So yeah, to your point, he will finally have board, and he'll have a 5-1. Or 5-5 and a 1-1, rather.
Napoleon does have Azure Drake in hand, so he's going to have something to play this turn, but Cydonia is going to be able to get a couple of favorable trades before Napoleon gets those taunts on board. However, Cydonia actually really running out of cards very quickly, so he needs to make these cards count as much as possible. Fortunately for him, picks up the second Thing from Below. Going to be able to use that with the Flame Tongue Totem, or he can Hero Power this turn if he'd like. Could actually, well, could save the Thing from Below and play the Flame Tongue, trade the Argent Squire, and Hero Power. I don't know if that's the best line of play. He probably wants to get that Thing from Below down quickly, but that would save 4 health on his Thing from Below that's currently on board.
Yeah, Cydonia has to realize he's going into these turns pretty soon where Napoleon's going to have these big bomb cards, and he's not really going to be able to contest them. So having things on board early, or rather before that process begins, he can start having initiative and at least be in the driver's seat when it comes to making the potential trades. But I think he's going to be a little disappointed when he sees the Arakoa come out. So let's see if he goes with that Hero Power. Nope, just going to go ahead and drop the... Oh, is it? He's thinking about it now. He's not sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any reason not to play it this turn. I like this better. I was just sort of going with what all the potential plays are, which I'm sure he was thinking through as well. But at this point, if you can get value off of that Thing from Below, you absolutely want to be able to. And now Napoleon's actually in a pretty tough spot because he can play Arakoa, but then the 7/1 Thing from Below would just be able to trade with it right off the bat. So actually, this is kind of a tough turn for Napoleon.
Yeah, and I think Cydonia was maybe in that last turn giving consideration to how devastating something like Swipe might be. Because, you know, Napoleon would have taken damage to do it, but he could have swiped the 5/5, Hero Powered into it, and it would have just been a naked Flame Tongue on the board. And, you know, Cydonia's not making totems anymore. So, yeah, Napoleon can't play down that Dark Arakoa in good conscience because of exactly what you said. You know, that's just going to immediately get traded into by the Arakoa.
Yeah, I think Swipe was definitely a large consideration there, especially since Napoleon is running 2 of them. Unfortunately, neither in hand. So Cydonia's bit of a greedy play isn't going to be punished at all. And Napoleon just going to have to play Disciple of Cthulhu on turn 6 with 2 Dark Arakoas in hand. Not what he wants to be doing. And there's the more usual result of the Tuskar Totemic, I'm starting to think. The Flame Tongue Totem. Really nice positioning there. He gets the buff on the Thing from Below. And Napoleon is at 8 health now.
Yeah, people have been saying that Flame Wraith Faceless is the most obvious outlier card that's the big busted card for Shaman with this set. But Thing from Below just quietly comes in and managed to reverse what was otherwise an extremely bad situation for Cydonia.
All right, so Napoleon picks up Living Roots off the top. Really important because without it, he just would have been dead next turn. So now Cydonia can, well, actually... that's just it.
Yeah.
Cydonia can Lava Burst the Dark Arakoa, run in with the Argent Squire, and deal 9 damage to face. And Cydonia, with the few cards he had left, is going to be able to take this game with his Shaman.
Yeah, it was a big swingy match based on tempo plays, cards like Innervate coming out, allowing for Druid of the Claw, and then obviously those back-to-back thing from below. So, yeah, that was a very swingy match, and yeah, there weren't actually that many bad draws, I think, for Cydonia in that situation because, you know, he was playing such an aggressive deck, and we hadn't, you know, even seen either of those Doomhammers. So, yeah, hard fought, but the victory goes to Cydonia, and he's going to go up 2-1 in this series.
Absolutely. Had Cydonia drawn something like second Argent Squire, either of the Tunnel Trogs, a Flame Juggler, either Totem Golem at that point in the game, it would have been much more difficult for him to win. But getting Thing from Below and then the second Thing from Below almost immediately in combination with Flame Tongue Totem just really gave him the power that he needed to close out that game very quickly before Napoleon was able to push his pressure onto the board and take the game with the Druid. So Cydonia going to take that game.
Absolutely. So when Cydonia is not unleashing the fury of the elements on his foes, he's actually a little bit of a globetrotter, likes to go out and get back to nature and travel all around the world. Check it out.
So I work in healthcare, and a few years ago I started working freelance so I could take sometimes to travel the world. I'm really a curious person, so that's the part of the reason why I like to travel so much. I like experiencing different cultures, so I would like to go pretty much everywhere I haven't been. I really like part about traveling where you see new stuff every day, do new things, taste new things, take a lot of pictures, which brings out like the little artistic side I have.
There we see what both of these players are hoping to leave the event with, the America's Spring Championship trophy. I gotta say, the trophy for the Spring Championship, a little bit better than the one from the Winter Championship.
I prefer it just a bit. The Stein was really cool. I'm sure Amnesiac and Nyman are happy about having it, but I like the Year of the Kraken. I like this Hearthstone crest just a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping whoever wins this will use it like a shield and go full Captain America's. There we go. There's the badge for the day. But yes, looking at this series, Cydonia now up 2-1, comes in here as a player who likes competitive gaming, likes being a perfectionist, but doesn't let the pressure get to him. We'll see if that holds up in game number 4. He's going to be on that Hunter, and Napoleon will be bringing out his Zulak.
All right. Actually, I believe that's going to be his Shaman deck.
I can't read. Yes, that is a Shaman.
There you go. You know what? To be fair, these 3 cards would usually be seeded as Zulak as well, so no tells of the Shaman right here, but that crest is a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, you know, that is definitely a dead giveaway, Cora.
Shaman versus the Hunter. All right, so this is definitely a battle of the early games. Whoever can get the board control very early on and pressure the opponent very quickly is likely to be the one that's going to walk away with the win. If Napoleon is able to use cards exactly like the ones in his hand to get some favorable trades to really put early pressure on the board, and Cydonia isn't able to get to the late game where the mid-range Hunter really shines, then Napoleon's Shaman is probably going to come out on top, and he decides to just keep his whole hand, picks up a second Abusive Sergeant, which is really going to be useful in pushing damage.
Yeah, I think in times prior, the Hunter had a way better matchup against decks that were more aggressive. You know, you had Explosive Trap was something that was brought in a lot, whereas now it's been mostly phased out. You had a lot more sticky minions that kind of allowed you to keep the board, but nowadays, Hunter tends to do better against the mid-range and control decks, whereas aggro decks can very much give it problems if it doesn't have a solid curve. And we see that Cydonia's curve is a little bit sketch here. He does have that huge toad, Eagle Hornbow, and the Animal Companion, but nothing on turn 1 he can play down immediately. And as you said, Napoleon's curve is pretty much as good as it gets.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd like to see some Tunnel Trogs in there, maybe a Totem Golem and a Rock Biter weapon, but this is pretty good. It's a pretty good start. Cydonia, only having one Unleash the Hounds in his deck, gonna be having a hard time coming back from a board deficit. No real comeback mechanics like the old mid-range Hunter had with the Knife Juggler, the double Unleash the Hounds that could sort of work its way back into a game even if it was behind in the start. So he does have that huge toad. He has the Eagle Hornbow, like you said. He's going to be able to clean up this board a little bit, but Napoleon is just going to be able to keep pushing pressure, and it looks like we're going to see a Doomhammer come down right on turn 5.
Yeah, I mean, unless something changes, almost like a Flame Wraith Basal centers the hand, and even then, you know, he might choose to be a little bit later on that one, although I would be surprised. Yeah, Cydonia gets that quick shot into hand, would allow him to deal with the Flame Juggler pretty conveniently, but for Cydonia, it's kind of a situation where he has to figure out how long he waits to answer threats before he himself starts trying to get on the board, and I kind of actually just like coining out the Eagle Hornbow here. Just get it going, deal with the 2-3. Next turn you have that Animal Companion. Hopefully you roll into something like Misha or Leok. I don't think you want Huffer in this situation.
I agree. I like the bow here. It gives you the Animal Companion on 3. On 4, you do have the huge toad and the quick shot. It's likely that you'll pick up something else like Infested Wolf. Maybe Houndmaster is not great on turn 4 without a beast on board. Looks like he is going to go ahead, coin that bow. It's nice just to have it for the next turn as well, in combination with the Animal Companion. And his turns coming up, well, they aren't the greatest. He's not going to save that coin for Kodo. He does still have things that he can play. So, yeah, I definitely agree with this.
Yeah, we see Napoleon just going ahead, using the hero power, and considering using Abusive Sergeant just to push damage, actually chooses to pass. So I think this is a pretty reasonable line, actually, because I think he wants to have those Abusive Sergeants to start looking at trading. He realizes he has a Doomhammer, has some damage he's going to be able to push, and a couple more draws could look at assembling a little more burst damage, but the Abusive Sergeant represents the ability to quickly trade things off the board with that 1/1 or the Totem.
The aggro Shaman deck actually relies quite a bit on early board pressure and early board damage, and similar to Zoo in a lot of ways, it starts by pressuring with the board, it gets really favorable trades, and then eventually sort of turns heel and decides this is the moment when I have to start going face, otherwise I'm just not going to win. So saving the Abusive Sergeants for something like this, a situation like this where he could trade the Argent Squire into the Leok favorably on the next turn, still make a totem, definitely gives him an advantage, where if he'd played it this turn, he would have gotten the additional 2 damage. Cydonia would have just been able to clear off the Abusive Sergeant with his Eagle Horn bow, and then yeah, he would have had no way to clear off his Leok. So I like saving it. It's definitely a very proactive play.
Yeah, speaking of proactive, this is going to be a great turn for Napoleon, being able to play down both those Abusive Sergeants and then the Totem Golem and put together a huge board here. I think Cydonia last turn was actually considering potentially using the Eagle Horn Bow on that healing totem just to play around something like Flame Tongue, but ultimately decided to hold the bow, which I can't fault him for, and now staring down a pretty intimidating board.
Playing the Totem Golem on turn 4 shows just how important the board really is for the Shaman, because if he had chosen to just use his hero power and make a totem instead of playing the Golem, then that would have left Napoleon open on turn 5 for playing Doomhammer. But instead, he values more the Totem Golem's 3 power on board and is saying, you know what, I can wait an extra turn to play Doomhammer, but I want that board presence right now.
Yeah, it makes him a lot safer to do something like Unleash the Hounds. Unleash the Hounds would have come out, taken out both Abusive Sergeants, taken off the shell on the Argent Squire there, so Totem Golem would remain up, and Yeah, I completely agree. I think against the Hunter, the board is much more important than getting that damage going, because you're going to get the damage going anyway if the Hunter can't deal with the board. And more often than not in these situations, it really can't. Not efficiently anyway.
Unleash the Hounds would be really nice here. He could, in combination with the Eaglehorn Bow, clear off that Totem Golem. It would just leave the Argent Squire without Divine Shield. But here it looks like he's just going to go ahead and play the Toad, play the Quick Shot, and clean off that Totem Golem. Had the option of the Houndmaster, but that's, yeah, like I said before, you don't really want to play Houndmaster by itself. You can afford to wait a little bit, but you can't afford to wait much longer. Napoleon picks up that Rockbiter weapon. He's going to be able to use it with the Doomhammer on the next turn, and that's 10 damage.
Yeah, we see there Napoleon gets the fortunate bounce from the huge Toad in terms of where that 1 damage goes. It goes to the face. Could have taken out the Abusive Sergeant, which would have been obviously the worst case scenario for him, so pretty happy with that result. And yeah, the damage is piling up quickly to the point to where if there isn't an immediate answer, and I'm actually not sure what the immediate answer even could be with regards to that Doomhammer, the Doomhammer Lava Burst could just end this in 2 turns.
Yeah, Cydonia not running Harrison Jones, so no actual real answer to that Doomhammer. He does have a couple of options this turn. He picked up the Fiery Bat, so Fiery Bat plus Houndmaster would put up a Taunt, which is not terrible, or he could just go ahead and play that Kodo. All 3 cards on Napoleon's board are targets. Certainly, he most likely doesn't want to hit the spell damage totem. He'd rather take some damage off of board. It looks like that's going to be what he goes with. Let's see what it hits. Hits that spell damage totem. It is nice to take that off the board, but when there's actual damage facing you at the moment, it's a much higher priority.
Yeah, Napoleon doesn't have to think about this turn. He knows exactly where he is going. Time to put on that Doomhammer, grab that Rockbiter, going to town. He does have enough damage to close it out with the Lava Burst next turn, so even if a Houndmaster comes down, he gets that damage in now and doesn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, very important to play the Rockbiter on the same turn that he Doomhammers now, because a Taunt minion on Cydonia's board would not be effective against the Doomhammer in that case. Napoleon can just burn right through it with Lava Burst, and Cydonia is going to hope that he's not able to. But
see, Napoleon just thumbing over that card, which is pretty clear indicator, I'd imagine, to Cydonia that he knows what's coming.
Yeah, pretty easy game from Napoleon. Definitely took a decisive victory here, and Cydonia is going to play it out. If he'd had several more turns, he has a really nice board, but Napoleon just has an abundance of damage here and is going to take game number 4.
Yeah, as you were saying, in that opening hand, he could have hoped for, something more like Tunnel Trog, possibly Totem Golem in the opening, but that opening hand was so solid and that allowed him to get the board, and the Hunter just really never had a chance to get it back. And from there was just able to leverage that pressure, get him to a point where Doomhammer, Rockbiter, and then the Lava Burst finishes him off. So pretty straightforward textbook from what we've kind of expected to see from Aggro Shaman since Whispers of the Old Gods and the release of Standard format.
Absolutely, definitely Napoleon taking that game a decisive victory over Cydonia's Hunter, and they're all tied up now. It's 2-2.
Yeah, anybody's match here, best of 3 now. Obviously, as we've been saying all weekend, single elimination, so if you win this, you're going to the grand finals. If you lose, you're still going home, sadly. But let's go ahead and take an opportunity to get a quick word from Cydonia before we get into our next match.
Like the first time I got Legend, I was playing Zoo, which is the first deck everyone will play when you don't have any cards. I just noticed I was good enough to get Legend with that deck. But afterwards, I tried to learn new decks, and at some point you just get good enough that you will get Legend regardless of whatever you do. So at first it's really good to just play one deck. You know how to play well and not always switch and change things around. After a while it just comes naturally.
Cydonia comes into this as someone who's just, got into it, wanted to see how far he could go, hits Legend once, keeps doing it over and over, and then just gets to the point where he's like, yeah, I'm just going to compete in this preliminary. I have enough points. Why not? It's really cool to see players kind of come in with that mentality. They don't just start playing the game like, all right, I'm going to get competitive. They start playing the game and start mastering the overall skills of the game before they ever get to that point.
Yeah, Napoleon, a bit of a different story, actually watching his favorite streamers on Twitch, seeing some plays that he didn't agree with and deciding, why can't I be doing that? Why can't I make those plays that I feel are best and try to compete at a high level? And, well, here he is, and he's doing a great job of it so far.
That's a great attitude to have, when you see someone doing something and you think you can do it better as opposed to just, going on about how you can do it better, actually work on doing it better yourself and showing off to the people at home that you can, and making it to this point is obviously a satisfying feeling.
A very Annie get your gun mentality. Anything you can do, I can do better. Just a quick musical reference in there. I figured maybe you'd appreciate it. Throwing one.
I play a lot of Face Hunter. I'm not a very cultured guy.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. You know what? Maybe like a dozen people in Twitch chat will get it. But anyway.
Yeah, we're left to two decks for each player remaining. Both have the Cthulhu Druid, and we have Cydonia with that Hunter and the Freeze Mage for Napoleon. So very curious to see how this Freeze Mage performs with the remaining matchups. The Cthulhu Druid lists are very similar. I think, respectively, there's like an Ancient of War and one other card separating. I believe Mulch is the difference between these two lists. So very curious to see how exactly it breaks down. Freeze Mage, obviously more than capable of dealing with Hunter, but if the Hunter does get to that late or mid to late game, can make things very hairy for the Freeze Mage player.
Yeah, Savannah Highmane can be a little bit difficult for the Mage to deal with, and of course Call of the Wild, something we haven't seen come up against the Freeze Mage too often because it is such a new card, but I anticipate 5 damage from Huffer might be pretty good.
Yeah, Cydonia was actually saying, he was looking to get to that Freeze Mage with the Hunter, so this is one of those things where even though Hunter is really board-centric, and we are going to see, actually, it looks like we're going to see the Hunter taking on the Cthulhu Druid. Cthulhu Druid almost got a win earlier off of those big tempo plays with Innervate. Let's see if Napoleon can bring out a similar performance with 2 Innervates in hand.
Yep, we've seen both players play these decks before in the match. Napoleon had a nice start with the Cthulhu Druid, but the Shaman was just able to edge him out, got some really nice draws on Sidonia's side, and then Sidonia's Hunter couldn't quite pick up any traction in the last game against Napoleon's Shaman, so well, it's gonna be interesting to see. The Hunter, I have a feeling if it gets a really nice start, will make some trouble for the Druid, but again, if the Druid is able to go ahead and get those early cards, the Cthulhu Druid really excels at sort of maintaining the game in their favor very easily. So this Living Roots, this Disciple of Cthulhu, is going to be a headache for Cydonia to have to deal with.
Yeah, but speaking of headaches, we do see that Savannah Highmane in the hand of Cydonia, as well as a Stranglethorn Tiger. So short of having a 1-drop, his hand is pretty much writes itself there. Would like to probably pick up that 4-drop to have that really strong curve that modern-day Hunter really benefits from. But yeah, Napoleon's hand mostly reactive. Doubt we're going to see Living Roots just come out on turn 1. That's not really, I think, the way he's going to want to approach this.
No, and Cydonia, maybe even more importantly in his deck, 2 Deadly Shots, which are going to be very important against the large taunts in Napoleon's Cthulhu Druid, such as Dark Arakoa. He only has 1 Ancient of War, but he does have 2 Druid of the Claws. So if it comes down to it and there's only 1 large minion on Napoleon's board, Deadly Shot from Cydonia could turn the game in his favor pretty quickly. So it does turn out that Napoleon is going to play down the Living Roots on turn 1. I like this. I think instead of saving it, Cydonia is likely to play a 2-mana minion with 2 health. Those are the only 2-mana minions he has in the list. So Napoleon says, might as well challenge it immediately. Like, there's no real reason not to.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it as removal, and obviously in hand it's a little bit more flexible in terms of what you can do, whereas when you commit it to the board, it is going to be those roots respectively. But especially after drawing that second copy, I agree with this play as well. So yeah, the Huge Toad's going to come out, and Napoleon's going to be able to very easily trade into it if he wants to. Could even look at using the coin to bring out Disciple of Cthulhu, which, curious to see if that's what he's going to do here. Could Hero Power into it as well.
Could also double Innervate out Sylvanas Windrunner.
Yeah,
but
why not?
I don't know, maybe save that one for a little bit later.
It's a big 5/5. Let's do it. Let's just
go. It is. It absolutely is. He has all of the ramp in hand. He has 2 Innervates, but he's missing some of those larger minions now. So if he's able to pick up something like an Azure Drake, a Dark Arakoa, then his curve is going to be really, really dangerous for Cydonia to have to deal with. And the Huge Toad Death Rattle hits one of those little saplings. It's better than hitting the Disciple of Cthulhu, so I'm sure Napoleon's happy about that.
Yeah, and I think Napoleon understands that, you know, when it looks at like what Hunter can actually do to deal with small minions, it's not a lot really. It kind of comes down to it. You have to play minions and start just trading the board fairly, or use something like Unleash the Hounds, which you're not going to use on a Disciple of a Cthulhu and a Sapling. So pretty comfortable board state, at least from the beginning here from Napoleon.
Cydonia has a couple of options. Can play King's Elec with the Fiery Bat, or he does have Animal Companion. In this case, something like Leok and Misha would actually be really nice in challenging the board, whereas Huffer, for once, I think might not be the card you want to get.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the common reference is, you know, you always want Huffer, and it is in fact always Huffer, but there are a lot of situations in these board control-centric matchups where Huffer's not great, specifically because the 2-1 will be able to trade into it. He does at least manage to get rid of the 1-1, so it's going to get a little bit of extra value from it.
Yeah, a little bit unfortunate there for Cydonia, but he is able to trade away that sapling. Now, Napoleon has a couple of options. He does pick up Druid of the Claw, which is really nice. He can go ahead and innervate that out, but then that means he would be trading the Disciple of Cthulhu into the Huffer. So an easier way to kill off that Huffer and keep Disciple would be to use Hero Power, but that would involve either playing the second Living Roots and waiting on the Druid of the Claw, or using the second Innervate as well. So here, just deciding what's more valuable to him, the Disciple of Cthulhu or getting that Druid of the Claw on board early.
Yeah, looking over this play, I think I like putting out Druid of the Claw here. I think I like being the aggressor, but at the same time, I mean, Sylvanas is there, so if that high main comes down, you just immediately put down Sylvanas. You don't necessarily have to worry about any silence because you know there are none in Cydonia's deck, so he has a couple of options here. Ultimately opting to go for the Living Roots, puts down some pressure, and deals with the Huffer with the Hero Power, so I think this is all very reasonable.
Yeah, I agree with this, especially since next turn he can go ahead and innervate out Sylvanas and then just play Druid of the Claw on curve, meaning that he saves the second innervate. So this is utilizing his resources maybe in a bit of a better way. He's going to get some value off of that Hero Power, which is really nice. Gets an armor, so the Huffer only deals 3 damage and saves that Disciple of Cthulhu. So now he has the same exact board state that he had just a couple of turns ago.
Yeah, and he keeps putting Cydonia in this awkward position where Cydonia doesn't really have a convenient answer to these small minions that have 1 health.
Cydonia's like, let's try this again, and
this time not for sure, but Huffer's going face this time. It's the time for trading into small saplings is over. Huffer's going to have his day. It's time to do 4 damage to the dome. I like it.
All right, and Napoleon picks Mire Keeper up off the top. Can either choose to gain 1 mana or make a 2/2 slime with it.
I think in this situation, you know, you look at your curve for the next few turns, it pretty much writes itself. You don't really need the extra mana. Maybe just putting out the extra pressure of the 2/2 is better. At the same time, you know, you might be considering that later on, you know, as those high mains comes out, as the Call of the Wilds come out, you might want to be able to quickly get to your Cthulhu or maybe some of your bigger drops, your Twin Emperors. So certainly a consideration. I think there's really a case for both.
I think to have Sylvanas on the board, you definitely want it there proactively. So you want to play your Sylvanas before your opponent plays their large minion, just to give yourself that advantage. But in this case, against Cydonia, he would be able to trade off his minions and then play something like Deadly Shot on the Sylvanas. Kill Command while keeping up that Fiery Bat would allow for Napoleon to take a small minion when he wants to use that Sylvanas to really get a larger minion. So in this case, the Mire Keeper allows him to push his board presence, not overextend into the board, and then still save some cards in hand for later turns. And then he was able to trade really nicely and sort of control those trades.
Yeah, and Cydonia now at the point where facing down 4 minions on board can play the Tiger and will allow him to start initiating the kind of trades that he wants to make. But he's not really pressing an agenda at all. And, you know, as much as Hunter has the nice late game, I think the ultimate late game here is going to go to the Cthulhu Druid. So if you let the situation get bad enough, it's not going to work out. At the same time, he doesn't really have a proactive line that allows him to get aggressive. The Animal Companions rolling Huffer both times have been kind of problematic for him.
Very problematic. He has the choice of playing King's Elec and the quick shot on Mire Keeper this turn, but that just allows Napoleon to get even more favorable trades. So decides that his only real option is going with the Tiger, and he's going to try and put together some form of a board for himself with Savannah Highmane on the next turn. Napoleon, Druid of the Claw seems easy enough.
Yeah, these saplings are doing work. I think these may be the
MVP saplings.
Yeah, these are the ones that came out. They saw how the first ones went, and they're like, we will learn from your experience.
We will hit the face this time and not die to death rattles from Huge Toad.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Cydonia again, not to harp on or necessarily belabor the point, but no explosive trap, one Unleash the Hounds. That was really the only thing he had to kind of bail him out of that early aggressive board state from Napoleon. And now Napoleon's really very firmly in the driver's seat. And, you know, the Savannah High Main is something you just naturally want to play on 6. Super powerful minion, always what you want to be playing, but Savannah High Main doesn't really feel like it actually accomplishes much here, especially when that Tiger cannot fully trade through the Druid of the Claw.
By playing Savannah High Main, you're taking an entire other turn of full board damage from Napoleon. If he has something like Swipe, then the game is pretty much just over. So Cydonia deciding, you know, do I even have the time to play down Savannah High Main to try and build up my own board and slowly clear your board? Or, you know, does Cydonia have to go ahead and play something like Quick Shot in culmination with a Stranglethorn Tiger to clear off that Druid of the Claw? 11, 15, that's going to be 16 damage from Napoleon.
Yeah, you called it. The swipe would be pretty close to game, but Sylvanas is also pretty good here.
Definitely not a bad card to play out. And honestly, at this point, Napoleon is just, you know, waiting for one more turn. Decides to innervate out that hero power, get that one more point of damage in, because now swipe plus hero power on the following turn is actually lethal. If by some miracle Cydonia was able to clear off Napoleon's board entirely.
Yeah, I mean, we see, you know, Cydonia had a really good opening curve for this one. You know, he was missing on the 4-drop, I believe, but otherwise he had that, you know, the huge toad, he had animal companions, he had the Stranglethorn Tiger, he's got the High Main right on 6. You got like the checklist here. It's High Main on 6, Call the Wild on 8, lose the game. The Druid just...
2 Huffers from animal companions, still lose the game. So just very unfortunate for the Hunter in this case.
Yeah, Napoleon, you know, played really well with what he had, and the more and more I think about that turn 1 living roots, when you understand that your opponent isn't going to have a good way to deal with them, not only are they going to allow you to trade into the minions that are going to be played down, you just start pressing your own agenda and start pressing the advantage, and we saw those second living roots hanging around and doing a bunch of damage.
Alright, so Cydonia needs some way to mitigate a lot of damage here. Houndmaster would have been really nice, but unfortunately doesn't win that joust. Throws out the well played and concedes. Napoleon going to take this match, going up to a 3-2 lead.
Yeah, he is 1 game away from going to the grand finals of the America's Spring Championship, so for Napoleon, that's got to be a good feeling. But you can see, you know, this is something it's very emotional for him, and it's very nerve-wracking to get to this point and be 1 win away, especially against someone, you know, Cydonia, again, 1 game facing elimination, and Cydonia basically looks like he's sitting in a coffee house. He's just having a nice, relaxed day. Like, things are, like, this is all according to plan. Like, I'll just come back and win. So we'll be right back before we get into our next match, guys, so don't go anywhere. One win away, 1 Freeze Mage win away for Napoleon from the Grand Finals. And as the deck he's already lost with once in this series against Cydonia's Zoo deck. Cydonia's going to need to beat it twice with Cthulhu Druid and Midrange Hunter. Have to imagine we're going to see that Midrange Hunter come out, try to get that quick win, try to just put down a dominating performance, because I think the Cthulhu Druid could potentially have a harder time against that Freeze Mage.
I feel like it's actually two very winnable matchups for Cydonia. The Cthulhu Druid featuring cards such as Ragnaros the Fire Lord, which are really effective against Freeze Mage. If it can get down some of that nice early game, build up a great board, even Fandral Staghelm into something like Nourish could ramp the card draw and ramp the mana so quickly that Napoleon would have a hard time actually combating the board state. So Cydonia is actually going to go ahead with this Cthulhu Druid. Yeah, I like his odds with this deck. I think the mid-range Hunter is also very reasonable as a choice, but he's going to put his hope in this Cthulhu Druid.
Yeah, I'll have to see what happens here. I guess when I look at this matchup, I consider the fact that, a lot of the explosive potential, up Druid from times past has changed with the way the combo has been modified, and otherwise it feels like it's a lot of just creatures on the board that don't necessarily have a lot of explosive offensive potential. But there are definitely some really powerful minions in their own right that are difficult to remove. Now, important to note, Cydonia is not running any kind of silence. There is no Crazed Alchemist in this to deal with Doomsayer. So if a Doomsayer Frost Nova comes down, that board, unless Swipe and Wrath Hijinks are considered, is probably just going to go down. Very excited actually to see how this matchup specifically plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. We see Cydonia with the Harrison Jones not going to be effective in this matchup. Actually, a very heavy hand for Cydonia. Twin Emperor Veclor is a great card. He has the Innervate, but Twin Emperor coming a little too early. Harrison, not very effective. Swipe, not going to do much. So a lot actually relying on this Raven Idol. What can Cydonia manage to pull from it?
Yeah, I think a lot of times you look at Raven Idol and you consider, okay, what spell do I want? But I think in this situation, looking at your curve, I think you're just going for a minion.
It's tough to say. I would say 90% of the time they do go for a spell, but here Cydonia needs to put on pressure and he needs to do it quickly. So yeah, the minion is just so risky. There's far too many options to guarantee that you're going to get anything useful. And yeah, he would just rather go with a spell and actually ensure that he is more likely to get something that will be playable to him, as opposed to running into Wisp, Target Dummy, and Hungry Crab.
I'm just saying, you could get Yogg Saron.
You could get Yogg Saron.
You could get Yogg Saron.
This could quickly turn into Yogg Saron Druid, but I think the spell here is just a lot more consistent, actually. So, Wrath, Nourish, Wisps of the Old Gods. We saw some Wisps of the Old Gods last week at the Asia Pacific Spring Championships. Didn't work out too well, so I have to think, yeah, not going to go with that. Nourish here. It's a little bit later game, but he can actually coin Innervate into it next turn for mana, I would assume, at this point. Card draw, not super key.
Yeah, especially drawing that Wrath. I mean, you have kind of nothing else to do, so I definitely like the Nourish. Get the mana crystals here. But I don't know, maybe it is something where you draw the cards, because what are you really... I mean, I guess you're ramping into playing Harrison.
Yeah.
The next turn, which, Harrison's still 5, 4, going to be putting out pressure, but I don't know, are you maybe looking for other cards that kind of help, other minions rather, that kind of help you start piecing together that early condition where, you are putting pressure on the board?
If Cydonia nourishes for mana on this turn, he gives up the Innervate, gives up the coin, but does gain 2 full mana crystals, so he would be able to hero power at the same time, which would be gaining 1 armor, which actually, is pretty good against Freeze Mage. And then the mana would help him to curve out a little bit better in the next coming turns. Basically, whatever he draws from then on would be playable. So
yep.
He's going to go for the mana here.
Goes ahead, takes up mana. As I said, will allow him to play out Harrison Jones next turn. So, and more importantly, what he does end up drawing, there's a better chance he will actually just be able to play it.
Taking a look at Napoleon's hand, he passed on turn 1, passed on turn 2, but that's okay because he's actually got a really nice hand. He's got Acolyte of Pain, which is going to provide some much needed card draw. He's already got an Ice Block, which is very, very important in the Freeze Mage, entire grand scheme of things. Forgotten Torch is a great card. Flame Strike, not too relevant right now. And then Frostbolt, which could come in handy. It actually provides a pretty clean clear on that Harrison Jones. So definitely not a bad hand for Napoleon at all.
No, and a lot of these plays on this turn specifically kind of represent different lines he could take. I mean, he could go ahead and just throw out that Forgotten Torch, get the Roaring Torch shuffled into his deck, start putting in the damage. He could put up the Ice Block, go ahead and just get that secured while there's not a lot of pressure on the board. I mean, you're probably not going to play down the Acolyte until you can ping it. Obviously, it's Freeze Mage. You want to be drawing as many cards as possible, but there you go.
I was just thinking there might be some merit to a Tempo Doomsayer here. Napoleon knows Cydonia was ramping into something. He picked Nourish from the Raven Idol. He decided to go ahead and Innervate coin into it, meaning that he has some sort of game plan. So Napoleon just says, I'm going to shut that down. I'm going to force you to deal with this, and I'm going to give myself a couple more turns to be able to gather more cards to deal with your oncoming aggression, because the Cthulhu Druid has very high value minions.
Yeah, I think we're going to see just a Wrathbird. I don't even, obviously he can't deal with it right now, just get it off the board, but let's allow him to cycle for something, and he gets the Disciple of Cthulhu, and that's probably just going to be turned. I don't think there's any universe where you, do anything aside from just Hero Power here.
No, just go ahead and Hero Power. No way of clearing off this Doomsayer, and honestly, no reason to clear off the Doomsayer here. Wrathing for a card was just simply a 2-mana means of cycle, so like a Wild Growth on turn 10, I guess. But in this case, there's not many minions that are high priority Wrath targets in Napoleon's deck, so more valuable just as a cycle tool. Yeah, and that Doomsayer, when we were, again, looking at all those options that he had on turn 3 there, that is definitely the one, to your point, he's ramping into something, what is it? Do I want him possibly putting that down? Had he gone with something like, and this is a very minor point, but had he gone with something like the Secret on 3 and then on 4, play the Doomsayer and then ping, it's one of those things where he could have got an extra ping in, which, to your point, the armor that Druid gets is not, nearly as bad as Warrior, say, with just card True Heart, Shield Block, cards like that, but it is certainly something that could become a factor. So this sequence, though, did totally pay off. Harrison did not come down, and we do see the Ice Block get developed, and Harrison Jones will be putting nothing in a museum. Yeah, in exchange for a missed hero power from Napoleon's side, he guaranteed the mitigation of the turn 5 from Cydonia. So had he played Doomsayer on turn 4 along with the King, it's very likely that Cydonia would have been able to clear off that Doomsayer, keeping whatever he had played on turn 5 for himself, or on 5 mana, not technically turn 5. So definitely worth giving up one hero power for Napoleon here. Works out much better this way. And Cydonia picks up Sylvanas Windrunner. Not the best in this case, because you could combo it with Doomsayer. There's not many minions that he's going to want to pick up from Napoleon, but just having a 5/5 body on board, pretty good. Yeah, just start pressing that damage, and just goes to show how incredibly difficult this deck can be to navigate at times, because you see a lot of the rules that traditionally you're taught in Hearthstone, like use all your mana each turn, try to make the most efficient play, don't always apply to Freeze Mage, because you have to so carefully navigate what your ultimate win condition is going to be. And Napoleon has said he is one of those players who is a high-level Freeze Mage player, and, absolutely living up to it this series. Absolutely. Playing very confidently, very calmly, and very, just with that game plan in mind, knowing exactly what he has to do against this matchup. And Napoleon had been saying that he had actually been practicing with a friend who was playing Cydonia's deck lists yesterday, so I imagine he tried to test out some of his less favored matchups to see how he could turn them into his favor. So if anybody can win this game with the Freeze Mage, I'm confident that Napoleon can do it. Yeah, we see here the double Disciple of Cthulhu come out. That's going to go ahead and boost Cthulhu to 10, which we do see the Twin Emperor sitting in hand of Cydonia. Also builds up the Cthulhu even more to where it could be something in the next couple of turns, even potentially breaks the block. So I like that play there, even though the second Disciple of Cthulhu was just, essentially face damage. All right, Napoleon picking up a decent amount of burn, actually. He has that Emperor Thaurissan, now picks up Alex Straza in hand. Fireball, Frostbolt, Ice Lance. Going to be 13 damage, 14 with a ping if he gets it. Blood Mage Thalnos obviously can elevate that. But, yeah, Napoleon slowly but surely picking up what he needs to burn out Cydonia. But Cydonia has the ultimate form of burn in hand with Cthulhu. Well, at this point, Cthulhu is a 10-mana, 10/10 Pyroblast with damage split up, obviously. But yeah, it is getting to that point now where Cthulhu has to be rattling around in the back of Napoleon's mind and always considering, what that is actually up to, how much damage he could potentially do, if he needs to have minions on the board to even possibly help mitigate it. All right, so Napoleon, what's he going to decide to do? He plays out the Ice Barrier, so not likely that his block is going to get popped anytime soon. And deciding whether or not, if he were to ping the Sylvanas, then he would have a very clean Flame Strike next turn, which I think is important to consider. And decides to go ahead and do that. Yeah, not too worried about taking the 2 damage from Disciple of Cthulhu. Instead, wants to set himself up for as much success as possible in the coming turns. And Cydonia picks up a Druid of the Claw off the top. Yeah, so what just happened there is certainly a very, very clear tell to Cydonia of what's possibly coming up here, unless he suspects that Napoleon is just playing, some mind games there. But
So he can put down the Twin Emperor, and the Twin Emperor, both of them would survive through the Flame Strike, especially, so if Cydonia sees this coming, he would probably just trade down one of the minions into the Novice Engineer just to protect them a little bit further from something like a trade and a ping onto one of them. But yeah, forced to play around it now. Gonna go ahead and pop the Ice Barrier, start putting in more damage. Curious to see if he still plays the Twin Emperors.
Flame Strike would not be effective against the Twin Emperors because they do have 6 health, but in that case, I can see Napoleon playing a Blizzard on the coming turn and then going into Flame Strike the turn after. So looks like Sidonia's gonna hero power down the Novice Engineer. He is gonna play Twin Emperor Vector. So Napoleon does have Blizzard on this turn if he wants to use it, and then can Flame Strike the turn after, guaranteeing a board clear.
Yeah, that Blizzard is gonna come down. And just going to see another ping, just reduce health just a little bit. Very straightforward turn, probably the shortest turn we've seen so far in this series from Napoleon.
Yeah, not a lot of thinking to have to do there. And Napoleon still not quite enough damage in hand. Alex Straza could reduce Cydonia to 15 health. He would have 17 with armor. Napoleon needs to pick up one more burn spell still. So the Roaring Torch from the Forgotten Torch would be really nice. He's got the second Fireball, second Ice Lance, second Frostbolt still. So he has an abundance of options.
Yeah, I like this play. The Cthulhu plays around the Flame Strike, which Napoleon had pretty clearly telegraphed that he had. So that and the Ice Lance does do a good job of mitigating his total damage that he can do.
Yeah, he has to protect his block this turn. It's very important. And Cydonia does have 8 damage from either the Ragnaros or the Druid of the Claw, plus the swipe. That Ragnaros off the top. And I'd actually said it before, something that makes this Cthulhu Druid really great against the Freeze Mage is the potential of this Ragnaros. You cannot freeze the Ragnaros effect, and in combination with the hero power, Napoleon's block is going to be popped exactly what he didn't want it to be. He does have second block in hand, but that's going to slow him down just a little bit.
Man, so much burn now being committed. These days, Antonidas is not in this deck anymore, so the ability to just generate a lot of fireballs is no longer there. So Napoleon has committed a lot of burn to dealing with that board, which, he absolutely had to do.
He's essentially given up his prior game plan, and Cydonia just has lethal here. He has Druid of the Claw in charge plus swipe. He could have played both Druid of the Claws. It just wasn't enough for Napoleon. Even giving up that burn, just Hail Mary play that did not work out, and Cydonia is going to tie up this series 3-3. Match point for both of these guys. Game 7.
Yeah, and it's going right into a matchup that Cydonia wants. This mid-range Hunter versus the Freeze Mage. He said it in his interview earlier. He's very much looking for this one, as it's one he feels extremely confident about. And, Cora, great call on the Ragnaros. Completely ended up seeing that being what Ice did. Napoleon had a very visceral reaction to it. But guys, before we get into our final game of the series, we're going to take a short break, so don't go anywhere. All right, guys, buckle up. We are going to Game 7 of this series. This is going to be Cydonia's second 7-game series of the tournament. For Napoleon, this is a very different story from the experience he had yesterday, where You know, to be completely honest, he just crushed that series.
Absolutely. 4-1 result for Napoleon. We thought it could have been a 4-0, but he did manage to give one game to his opponent. This time, however, it's a lot closer.
You asked for it.
Yeah, we are going to go into, as we said before the break, Freeze Mage versus Mid-Range Hunter, and Cydonia's opening hand already looking pretty okay.
Both guys actually with really nice starts. Napoleon gets that Loot Hoarder. Frostbolt, Forgotten Torch can both be used to clear off some early minions, and Napoleon, this game really needs to watch his life total, much like with any, you know, Freeze Mage game, but especially because Cydonia has access to that steady shot hero power, which is going to be able to deal a steady 2 damage every single turn that he decides to use it, which I would hope he would choose to use it quite a bit in this matchup.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where Hunter damage can really quickly pile up, and I talked about earlier how Hunter these days is a lot better at just straight up dealing with control, not necessarily through minions with charge, but just overbearing pressure that they put on in the mid to late game with cards like Savannah Highmane, Call of the Wild, even Stranglethorn Tiger can be really problematic, as really Blizzard and Frost Nova are the only real ways to slow it down.
All right, the guys really taking some time to think about their mulligans, and Cydonia decides to throw away the Eaglehorn Bow and the Infested Wolf, just keeping King's Elec. But it really pays off for him. He picks up Fiery Bat on 1 and Animal Companion for turn 3. Napoleon choosing to keep that Loot Hoarder and the Frostbolt. Picks up a Novice Engineer, which is really nice, and Pyroblast, which a little bit early to the party, but you never know. Could come in handy. Some Emperor Thaurissan reductions, and that card's pretty good.
Yeah, speaking of pretty good, Stampeding Kodo in the hand of Cydonia. He got his 1 copy, and that is going to be the way he deals with Doomsayer, if the Doomsayer does come out at any point in the near future. Cydonia as a mulligan felt a little bit, I don't know, kind of felt a little bit greedy to me. I thought his hand was pretty reasonable otherwise. You had the bow, you had the Infested Wolves, and Infested Wolves can be a little bit problematic to get going against aggressive matchups, but against this, I felt like it was a pretty reasonable keep, but throws it back and is rewarded with just an incredible curve.
I feel like getting rid of the Infested Wolf would have been very reasonable. The Eaglehorn Bow would have been pretty useful for something like an Acolyte of Pain. This Loot Hoarder even, it could have worked okay on, but in this case, yeah, just like you said, he decided to be a little bit greedy, and you know, in a match where you have to win this game to win the entire match to go to the grand finals, I'm okay with a little bit of greed.
Yeah, go big or go home. You know, and in Cydonia, like I said, was rewarded for his mulligan choices. Draws a Hyman as well, so this hand is really coming together very nicely. We saw Napoleon choose to go ahead and use the coin just to ping off the Fiery Bat. Did not choose to play the Novice Engineer or Loot Hoarder, so obviously those would have put a little bit more onto his board, but he probably would just ended up trading them anyway into the Fiery Bat, so I like the hero power there from Napoleon.
Yeah, if he was going to go ahead and coin out Minion anyway, that would do essentially the same thing as the hero power. Might as well just use the hero power now and try to get a trade in the future with one of those minions. Cydonia, unfortunately, not winning that joust. Napoleon did have a lot of lower power minions in the deck to lose that joust with, but gets Emperor Thaurissan and ends up drawing it the very next turn.
Yeah, Huge Toad is huge, but he's not that for the Emperor there, unfortunately. Cydonia going to be able to go right into these Animal Companions, and I think it's the second time we've seen him play this Hunter in this series and have turn 3, turn 4 Animal Companion. Now he wants those Huffers.
Yeah, watch him get Leok now.
No, don't say that. You always, you always encourage Animal Companion to give the
Huffer.
Huffer. Yeah, think Huffery thoughts.
All right, Napoleon chose to Frostbolt the King's Elec instead of playing out that Loot Hoarder on the previous turn. Again, just wanting to deal with that damage very quickly. The Freeze Mage has to be very conscious of their health in this matchup because of burst spells such as Kill Command, because of the Steady Shot hero power, Call of the Wild, Huffer just from an Animal Companion. So choosing to sacrifice that Frostbolt in place of saving 3 damage to his face. Rob, I don't want to say I was right. I haven't gotten any other predictions right in the past 2 tournaments, but that looks like a Leok to me.
And that is exactly what Napoleon wants to see, I'd imagine, is Leok as opposed to Huffer here. Loot Hoarder comes down, and unfortunately comes down on turn 3, so that's all he does, floats a mana. And Freeze Mage often ends up with these kind of awkward turns early on, where it's just trying to do something to get either more card draw going, more pressure, or just the ability to stay alive and trade with minions. Cydonia could play down second Animal Companion here, could equip the Eaglehorn Bow. I'm curious to see if he actually trades in, or rather trade, well, now you don't, but yeah, never mind. No curious, you get the bear.
You know what? Still not Huffer, but it's okay. It's not bad. And the Leok here actually would have been not terrible. It could have traded into the corner reasonably well. But Napoleon going to go ahead and clear off that Misha. Pretty easy choice for him. And Cydonia has a bit of a missed turn. He doesn't want to play that Kodo, certainly not, because Napoleon will likely have 2 Doomsayers later on in the game. Eaglehorn Bow plus Hero Power allows him to get in 5 damage pretty easily, but he doesn't advance his board state at all, which is, you know, a little bit difficult to stomach.
I still think you go for it. I'm always a fan of turn 5 Eaglehorn Bow Hero Power. You know, you're getting in a fair bit of damage. Obviously, over 2 turns, you know, with the 1 Hero Power and Eaglehorn Bow, that's going to be 8 damage. So I don't think that's so bad. I mean, I think with this play, you're going to go Eaglehorn Bow Hero Power. I would be really surprised if he just jams down the Kodo, because Doomsayer is definitely one way where this can become problem. But that said, he has a Deadly Shot. You know, he has a Deadly Shot, which would also potentially deal with it. So, yeah, going to go ahead and just see the Hero Power here.
You know what? He's got Savannah High Main on turn 6, so he can't feel too bad about having to somewhat miss a turn. He did get some damage to face, so not bad. Napoleon going to play down that Ice Barrier. Loot Hoarder coming out on the board. Pretty straightforward turn. Ice Barrier going to give him 8 armor and sort of mitigate quite a bit of that damage coming out from Cydonia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure you just play High Main here. There's not really a lot of thought. I mean, it's a big line. It costs 6 mana. You have 6 mana. That could just be a line on your board.
Does make mathematical sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a strong math guy, but I will say that is a big lion. You could Kodo to get rid of the Loot Hoarder, but the Loot Hoarder is not threatening to trade with anything. And it's not like Abusive Sergeant or Defender of Argus are coming out here, so I think just been lying.
You know what? Cydonia could even just trade with the Eaglehorn Bow into the Loot Hoarder.
No.
And then, you don't like it?
Nope.
No?
We're not doing that.
You're not a fan? We're not doing that.
No, we are definitely not putting 3 points of damage into a Loot Hoarder.
You are the resident hunter expert.
I got so question here. You know, obviously we gave you a hard time about being a resident secret paladin expert. And I'm the resident hunter expert. How bad does it feel?
Hurts a little bit, Rob.
It does hurt sometimes.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I'll get over it.
All right, we see.
Twitch chat never will, but oh well.
Leok gonna go ahead and just hit Napoleon right in the face, and rope's coming down.
Gotta play out that high main quickly. All right, you're right here. Rob chooses not to trade with that Loot Hoarder. It's not a threat. It doesn't actually trade with anything on board, so deciding just to save that 3 damage. Gonna use it a little bit later. Probably go face.
Yeah, and Napoleon's situation here is certainly not good, right? No answer to the high main. If that high main hits, really, I would say twice, it's probably game, even with Alexstrasza in hand. And Alexstrasza will be reduced to 8, but yeah, no answer to this immediately. But Deadly Shot, I think, going to do work here.
All right, Napoleon does get the reduction from Tharasan, has Blizzard in hand, gets the reduction on the 2 most expensive cards in his deck, Alexstrasza and Pyroblast. Still has a couple of ways to draw cards in hand. He has the Novice Engineer and the Blood Mage Thalnos, which both cycle. So he does have ways to stall still. And as long as he's able to stall and then remove Cydonia's minions, it's still possible.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think Napoleon's out of this per se, but that high main needs to be answered. Is kind of what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
It's just going to represent so much damage. What I would expect from Cydonia here is, you know, you put the Leok into the Loot Hoarder, go ahead and use a Deadly Shot. You have 4 mana left over. I actually wouldn't even mind a kill command. Just start going for it, get that damage in. Because otherwise, I guess you're looking at Quick Shot Hero Power, but you know, you have the beats on the board. Let me see the Quick Shot, so he doesn't want to damage his Leok, and he's going to Deadly Shot. So yeah, now you're going to just see the Hero Power come out.
Yeah, this way the Leok doesn't actually die to Blizzard. The only thing that removes it directly would be a Flame Strike. So decides keeping the minion on board is definitely more important in this situation. And that Deadly Shot getting really nice value, going to be able to take out Emperor Tharasan. Napoleon picks up some more draw, but is going to be able to, yeah, just Blizzard this board, freeze it up, can't take another 7 damage from Savannah High Main. It's just too much for him.
Yeah, we see Pyroblast in hand, we see Roaring Torch, Alexstrasza is there, and I think the last few turns, Cydonia keeps drawing these cards which are basically just not beast minions, and he'd like to be pushing more things on the board, but he's getting, you know, kill commands, Eaglehorn Bows. So I actually, let's see here, Napoleon will have that Alexstrasza available to him. Yeah, I gotta say, looking at this board right now, I am prepared to be wrong, as I so often am, but I feel like this is actually pretty even. because Napoleon can freeze the Savannah High main for another turn or even just kill it.
Napoleon is definitely looking for Ice Block. I think that's priority number 1 here. He's definitely picking up damage. With Alex Straza, Roaring Torch, and Pyroblast, he has the 15 he's going to need following the Alex Straza, but unfortunately it's over 3 different turns. So at this point, he just needs to pick up cards. All right, there's Fireball. So now if he were to just play Fireball, Roaring Torch, and then Pyroblast the following turn, there's the Ice Block. All right, so now he's got a little bit more time. Unfortunately for him, even if he chooses to freeze the high main this turn, Cydonia has 5 damage from Kill Command, 3 from the Kodo, and then 2 from Steady Shot, which 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Exactly the health that Napoleon has. So his block is not going to be safe.
Yeah, we saw a reaction from Napoleon. I'm afraid, Napoleon feels like he might have possibly made a mistake there. But looking at what Cydonia has now, he draws that Unleash the Hounds and isn't really going to get a whole lot of use, unfortunately, against this 1-1. So kind of has to wonder how much he wants to invest against a potential Alex Straza.
At this point, Napoleon is most likely thinking about Alex Straza himself. He has quite a bit of damage in hand that if he's able to just Alex Straza himself and then live a couple of turns, he could be able to burn down Cydonia from 27 health is certainly a lot, but combined with an Alex Straza attack, it's certainly possible. So unfortunately, there's still the problem of that Savannah High main on board.
Yeah, you said it earlier. That Savannah High main not getting dealt with, just representing so much damage over multiple turns. And I mean, look, Napoleon can Alex Straza on the next turn, but he's still staring down 9 damage on board. He's looking at the hero power. He's looking at the Eagle Horn bow, which obviously he doesn't know the Eagle Horn bow is in hand, but yeah, has to assume there's potentially some burn. So yeah, this is now starting to look a little bit grim.
Yeah, well, combined with the Unleash the Hounds, Cydonia will have the 15 he needs. Second Ice Block. Okay, that's going to buy him another turn. But question is, will it still be enough? Napoleon definitely looking like the nerves are getting to him a little bit, and certainly understandable. This is a huge, huge game.
Yeah, I mean, you get all the way to this point, and for someone who is as passionate as he is about proving he's one of the best players, hard to not be a little bit upset when you're facing down a situation like this.
That's it, Rob.
That is going to be
That's going to be it.
Cydonia is going to close this out, and he is going to be moving on to the grand finals of the America Spring Championship.
Wow, Napoleon just taking that risk, hoping with every fiber of his being that Cydonia didn't have 1 damage from hand, but unfortunately for him, Cydonia had more than 1 damage in hand. And Cydonia, your pick to take it all, Rob, is going to be going to the grand finals.
Yeah, I'm excited for Cydonia, but